afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to commence the next panel on crime and the new crime bill. I'm Paulette Brown, as Reverend Jesse Jackson indicated, President of the National Bar Association. We have today a number of distinguished panelists, and therefore I am not going to talk a long time because we have a number of experts in the field, and I don't want to take any of their time because their time will be more restrictive than the last panel. We have, as you can see, far more people who want to share with you their thoughts regarding crime in this country and the proposed crime bill. You recall that then candidate Clinton proposed while he was campaigning to do something about the crime which was infecting and inflicting this nation. And on August 11th, 1993, he set forth his plan to do something about crime in America. Without going further, other than to let you know the 5 primary aspects, which include more cops on the street, punishment to young offenders, anti-juvenile gang and drug trafficking grants, substance abuse treatment for prisoners in state prisons and in the federal system is the 5th one. I am not going to go into the details because I'll let our experts do that. And with that, I'm going to start with the Honorable John Conyers, Congressman from the state of Michigan.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairwoman, distinguished President of our Bar Association, to my colleagues in the Congress who are here, members of this panel, law enforcement, committed community leaders, ministers, social activists. This conference is almost historic in that it gives us a chance to organize, reinvigorate ourselves, acquaint ourselves with the political situation, and begin to do something that we rarely have an opportunity to do in our society politically, as that is to take the initiative, even in an uphill struggle, to move the government and the country away from the simplistic, paternalistic attitude about crime prevention in the United States. I've been around through 19 omnibus crime bills, and all each one has done after the other is add penalties, mandatory minimums, more punishment of capital offenses. Note there are 50 new death penalty offenses in the Senate crime bill already passed. So what we're doing under this inspired leadership is to have this national conference on crime meet, pull ourselves together, and move into this struggle as we educate everyone from the White House to the Congress to the Department of Justice to the Drug Czar's office to the FBI to the local police forces of what it is we really need to do. In other words, what we're trying to present here, and I think it's been done in an able way these last 2 days, is the best case for changing our strategy and moving on to something else to deal with crime. The good news is that we don't have to reinvent too many other things. We have a number of strategies, including the Congressional Black Caucus alternative crime bill that's been worked on by every congressman up here. The American Civil Liberties Union has done yeoman work. We have the Congressional Black Caucus alternative budget, which has annually set out new departures in both developing social service programs. We have the economic stimulus package of the president, which met a sorry fate among mean-spirited members of the Congress. And we have the Local Partnership Act, which came out of the Government Operations Committee, which I'm privileged to chair, which would send money directly into cities and towns based on unemployment and the number of poor in the community, so that there was a realistic distribution of resources. So we're here to examine these alternatives. We've put them together, and we want to recognize that if it hadn't been for this spirit that we bring here, there wouldn't have been any need to meet about a crime bill, because they thought that this was a foregone conclusion. It would have been passed and signed into law with all of the problems that are in it. The one issue embedded in it is this notion of locking up permanently more and more young people. 3 strikes and you're out. We have these prosecutorial mandates to try young people as adults, many of whom have no idea that they're walking into a courtroom with a stacked deck, and they're never going to come out of the bars that they get put behind as soon as they finish their trial. It's all set up there, and all we're saying is what Reverend Jesse Jackson has preached for a decade. Put the money on the front end rather than on the back end, and you will get results. Why can't we learn that simple lesson? Why can't we perceive the truth and validity after one failed omnibus crime bill after the other? It's happened year after year, and what we said in the beginning of this year, in a reuniting of spirit and faith, by God, it isn't going to happen in 1994. And that's what makes our coming together here so awfully important. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Conyers. I'd next like to call upon Congressman Don Edwards from the 16th Congressional District in California.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm honored to be here with all of you, and especially my 2 respected colleagues in the House of Representatives, Bobby Scott, and my dear friend of many, many years, John Conyers. This is a very important conference, as John Conyers just mentioned, and as the Reverend Jesse Jackson stated. It is the opening shot in one of the great battles that we're going to have, not only in '94, but in this decade and perhaps another decade. The historic enemies, the historic adversaries will once more in Congress be pitted against each other. Those who say the answer to crime is build more prisons, and God knows they've already built more than any other nation by far, or have more death penalties, lock them up, just do everything violent you can to people, and the ones that we consider to be on our side, their adversaries, the people in Congress and in the country who say, first, we must begin to cure the malady of crime in this country, which was discussed so thoroughly, I thought, in the panel on welfare. This time, for the first time, and John Conyers was right, we've had a lot of omnibus crime bills and they didn't do any good. We voted against them, incidentally, all of them. This time we have new and powerful support. Every police chief, I think, in the land is on our side. Every mayor is on our side. They know that more prisons, more death penalties will not do the job. I have been watching them on TV and listening to them on the radio in the last few months and wondered and was very delighted with the turnaround in the police chiefs and the police community generally and with the mayors of the various countries. They say, don't just build more prisons, don't do it. Give us the resources so that we can, and the guidance so that we can put into effect in our neighborhoods and in our cities, and yes, in rural America, the kinds of programs that help kids, help families, make it impossible for and improbable for those young people to go into crime at all. We can do it. This is the defining moment insofar as crime is concerned in America and as far as legislation is concerned. It will be a battle royal, I assure you. So you see, the bill in the House hasn't been written yet. There are 3 bills. We have the Senate bill, which really has so very much wrong with it we won't even discuss it. We have the Craig Washington bill. John Conyers and the Black Caucus wrote that, and it's a splendid bill. It would do more to turn crime around in this country than anything else. And our Chairman Jack Brooks bill, which is sort of in between. But it's going to be a big battle. We're going to have 3 subcommittees writing different portions of the bill. Bobby Scott and John Conyers are valuable members of each of them. And come March, maybe late in February, we will grapple with it in the full committee, on the floor of the House, and in the conference with the Senate. And with this kind of a spirit and atmosphere that I'm experiencing here today, and I consider myself very lucky to be here for the inspiration, I think that this time we will win. They had their chance. They've had their chance. They've had their way with us for 25 years, and they failed. Now it's our turn.
Thank you, Congressman Edwards. We have another Congress person on this panel, but I'd like to mix it up for a few minutes and call upon Reverend Albert Gallman from the Metropolitan Baptist Church.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, and I'm honored to be on this panel today. I'd just like to address one part, since our time is short, of the crime bill, and that is punishment. I think we need to be very careful when we look at the punishment side of the crime bill. For one, it calls for the death penalty. And we as a people, as a humane people, must really reconsider this entire effort about the death penalty, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Dr. King once said that if we all believed in an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, we all would be dead and toothless. And we must really be concerned about that in a nation that has not come to grips that liberty and justice is for all. And let me allow those who are for the death penalty to rest assured that they are biblically correct. The death penalty is a biblical concept. It is rooted in the Old Testament, but along with it, it's rooted in justice. And we have not found a way in this country to administrate the death penalty in a just manner. African-American males are held victim to the death penalty more so than anyone else, and simply because they may not have enough funds to secure a proper attorney. So we need to address this punishment side, look at this punishment side, and say that the death penalty need not be a part of it. Within the District of Columbia, we have some of the toughest laws on crimes that can be on the books. A person can be in the District of Columbia sentenced to prison for life without parole. They can be sentenced to 30 years without parole. And yet there are still individuals within this city, in this jurisdiction, who is asking for the death penalty. If we are going to become a people who simply just want a death for a death, then we are no better than those who are on the streets. We have become a gang of our own self. We have enough killing on the streets. And if our present situation that we live in now does not show us that these youth who are on our streets are not afraid of death, that's not a deterrent to them. They live in the midst of death every day. They see their friends, they see their buddies, their mothers, their fathers, their sisters and brothers killed every day. Death is not a deterrent to them. They continue to kill. I mean, if you actually look at it, a person who is involved in our streets and in a community dealing in drugs, they have sentenced themselves to a death penalty. They, in essence, in the run of time, will be killed. One of the things that is taught now within New York City, is that an African American male who lives to be 40 is a rarity. And that is because those individuals who are linked in these types of crimes have sentenced themselves to the death penalty. So I would say that we need to reorchestrate some of the funds that we're looking at in killing people on the punishment side, in looking at ways in which we can correct them. At this moment right now, we know who will come out of prison in 5 years on parole. We should begin training those individuals right now so that when they enter out of the system, that they are prepared to go to work. What we do now is we put people out on the streets who are not prepared to go to work, and it's a revolving door. We must begin to put money in the front end to begin to look at the results of what comes out the pipeline and make sure that it is a positive statement that's made at the end of the pipeline. So my statement to that as a minister and as a potential father-in-law of my daughter's husband, I hope that we will begin to look at some solutions for African American males who are now in prison. And the solution is not the death penalty. The solution is adequate programs that meet the needs of human beings. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Goldman. I'd like to call upon Ron Hampton, Executive Director of the National Black Police Association.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. When we talk about the crime bill positive alternatives, I hope that we're sincere about that, because what we have had in the past and what we have now hasn't been positive at all. And let me raise a couple of those problem areas. Number one, the police. You must understand that the very institution in our societies whose job it is to produce and eliminate violence is use violence to make our society safe. That don't even make sense. And in my 21 years as being a police officer, and we talk about that we're here to provide public safety and safety in our community, police officers very seldom do that. As a matter of fact, the job of making communities safe is not the job of police, and we have to, in order to look at evaluating what it is that police officers do in our society. And I say that also it comes out of a mentality, out of a paradigm and a philosophy that we have used in traditional policing in this country for the last 150 years. The crime bill talks about community policing, and surely if we're going to have community policing, then we need to have community government. We also need to talk about and look at community policing in more than just a popular phrase that a lot of sincere and sometimes not so sincere police officials talk about today, because it is a popular word. But genuine police or community policing would talk about the participation on the part of the citizens in the implementation stage, in the police policy development stage, the whole true policing strategy that goes on in our community. If that's going to be community policing, then we're going to have that kind of involvement from our community. And we don't have that yet. There are very few police departments who are even experimenting with community policing. Even my police department here in the District of Columbia, we are experimenting with community policing, but we haven't even moved out of the embryonic stages of looking at and doing community policing. And because it is a very popular word, and we want to be on board, but we haven't looked at that, nor are we doing it in a way that's going to ultimately give us the kind of police department that's controlled and operated by our communities. It reminds me of a story that I tell sometime, and we have young people who I've worked with along my 21 years as a police officer who are now police officers, and and they come in policing very excited, and again, I think that that's wrong. We ought to recruit people out of the spirit of service rather than out of the spirit of adventure. But we get these young people, and then they spend 21 weeks in the training academy, and then when they get out of the training academy, it seems as if a metamorphosis have taken place, and then now these individuals are come very gung-ho, John Wayne, super cop-oriented, and go out and police our communities rather than protect them. And if we're talking about community policing, we need to talk about a new style and strategy of recruiting these individuals to work in our community, because they have to understand that it's about protecting our community, not policing our community. And more importantly, we got to look at, we need to look at this whole strategy of this 100,000 more police officers to work in our community, because if we're talking about 100,000 more police officers and we're going to put them in the same police departments, in the same philosophy and the same strategy and the same paradigm that we've been doing traditional policing in for the last 150 years, then they're going to fall in the black hole that exists in our police departments that we have in there now. And it's not how many, it's what they do. So we need to really be serious, and it needs to be articulated in the crime bill that it just can't be community policing and 100,000 more police officers just simply because we say we're doing community policing, or that this police department is sincere, or we need to have some litmus test about what it is that community policing is going to do, what are these officers going to do, because again, simply having 100,000 more police officers is not the solution to the problem. We need to know what it is that these police officers are going to do. And last but not least, I would like to say that we need to move away from talking about a broken criminal justice system, because our criminal justice system is not broken. It works very well on the backs of African American people. And to prove that, all we need to do is look in our prisons. All we need to do is look at the people that get locked up every day. And if we have over 1.5 million people in this country that are incarcerated, and if we have almost 50% of those are African Americans, you know the criminal justice system is like a funnel. Only 2% of the people who actually get arrested actually go all the way through the criminal justice system funnel to incarceration. So you know how many people we actually lock up in this country. So the criminal justice system is not broke. It's not broke. It works well on the backs of some people and works for some other people. But we need to be sincere about it. So if the bill is going to address the criminal justice system, we need to talk about reform, but reform in the sense that it's going to be equitable across the board and be sincere about working in the best interest of the people who really give the criminal justice system the power that it has in our society, and it shouldn't be working on the backs of the poor and African American people in this country, but work for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hampton. Congressman Bobby Scott from the 3rd Congressional District of Virginia.
Thank you, Attorney Brown, Reverend Jackson, Representative Conyers, and Representative Edwards. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to the Rainbow Coalition for making possible this opportunity for us to come together to discuss an issue of great importance to our communities. The war on crime has a special meaning to those of us in the African American community, because we cannot let anyone forget that when we seek to deal with crime, we seek to alleviate a problem that has robbed, raped, and murdered our sons and daughters and our neighbors and friends in greater numbers than have ever been witnessed before in the world. In our community, 11-year-olds are planning their funerals. 25% of young black men are under the control of the criminal justice system. And if we continue along the path of destruction, we can expect 1 out of every 25 young black males now in kindergarten to be murdered by a handgun by the time they're 18 years of age. So with regard to the debate on crime, this is where we come from. Now, first of all, we know how to prevent crime. All of the studies that show a continuum of services, starting with teen pregnancy prevention, prenatal care, parental training, Head Start, quality education, recreational programs, dropout prevention programs, summer jobs, job training, guaranteed college scholarships, they have been proven to reduce the incidence of crime. Head Start programs, for example, have been studied and have been demonstrated in their effectiveness, not only to increase the graduation rates and lower teen pregnancy rates, but specifically to lower involvement in crime. The Job Corps program has been studied. 75% of the Job Corps participants move on to a job or full-time study. They earn 15% more than those who did not participate in the program. And not surprisingly, Job Corps participants are 1/3 less likely to be arrested than non-participants. Incredibly, these programs not only reduce crime, they also save money. Studies of the Head Start program estimate that $4.75 is saved for every dollar spent on Head Start by reducing the future costs of remedial education, welfare, and crime. And studies of the Job Corps program estimate that $1.45 in future expenditures on participants are avoided for every dollar spent on the Job Corps program. Improvements in education and job training are therefore important components of any good crime prevention program, particularly in today's society where jobs require skills and education. For example, 40% of all 18 to 24-year-olds working full-time don't have the skills today to make more than a poverty wage. And that's a national figure, so we can only imagine what the number is in the inner cities. And where there's no hope for a decent job, and when kids can earn an estimated $10 to $20 an hour or more selling drugs, compared to $4 or $5 an hour at a minimum wage job, if they can find one, we can't be surprised that many of our youth choose to resort to crime. And we see the results of this. We find that 2/3 of all of our prisoners in prison are high school dropouts. So we know that the best way to effectively reduce crime lies in addressing the root causes of crime. Unfortunately, there's no issue in society today where there is a greater difference than responsible government and political popularity than dealing with crime. In the politics of crime, the right thing and the politically popular thing are total opposites. The best politics of crime involves the emotional appeals, the mandatory minimum sentences, life without parole, no probation, no rehabilitation, more death penalty, and put them to death quicker by eliminating the appeals. That strategy appeals to emotion, but does nothing more than help politicians get elected. They do nothing to reduce crime on the street. So we have to hold our public officials accountable and not let politicians manipulate this issue simply to add new rhetoric to their campaign brochures or additional fluff for their slick campaign commercials. Let's look at where this strategy has got us today. If you listen to the politicians, you would think that America is reluctant to lock people up. But the truth is, across America since the mid-1970s, the prison population has already tripled, and prison construction is now one of the major growth areas in most of our states. America today has the highest rate of incarceration of any country on earth. Most industrialized nations are able to get by locking up less than 100 people per 100,000 population. And in fact, only a handful of countries lock up more than 100. Russia, number 3 in the world, locks up 268. Number 2 in the world, South Africa, locks up 311 per 100,000 population. And the United States locks up 450 people per 100,000 population nationally. But in the African American community, 1,300 or more are locked up, a rate 4 times worse than South Africa, and in some of our inner cities, the rate approaches 2,500 to 3,000 people in prison, in jail today for every 100,000 population. Yet the violent crime rate continues to inflict pain and suffering to our communities, and so it ought to be obvious to all of us that we cannot incarcerate ourselves out of this problem. As we plot our strategy to combat crime, we have to realize that incarceration is not free, and we have to consider the costs. For example, when we listen to the rhetoric like end parole, sounds tough on crime, it helps politicians get elected, but let's look at what it actually costs. If we eliminated parole in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we estimate that cost to be $2.6 billion, which is enough to build a brand new Boys and Girls Club, fully staffed in every precinct in the Commonwealth of Virginia and $600 million left over. Now, our precincts have about 2,000 to 3,000 registered voters in each precinct, $1 million Boys and Girls Club in every precinct in the state in lieu of that rhetoric. And yet, if we don't change our laws in Virginia, we're already spending $100 million on prison construction every year for the foreseeable future just to accommodate the presently growing prison population. So make no mistake about it, I'm not suggesting that we reduce the number of prisoners, which is already 4 times worse than South Africa, and some areas 8 times worse than South Africa. I'm suggesting that if we're going to spend any more money to address crime, that the additional money is better spent on prevention initiatives rather than more incarceration. So those who call for ending parole and other slogans which have the effect of increasing the rate of incarceration, they have manipulated the public without regard to the cost of the policy. And the need to build new jails, the cost of which can be upwards of $70,000 per bed, already challenges us financially to keep up with those demands. And when we hear politicians use slogans like life without parole, they ignore the fact that there's no evidence that we do any good at all by holding thousands of 60-year-old plus aging prisoners that committed a crime 35 years ago at $30,000 a year. And we end up with these policies simply because politicians have been making complex public policy decisions based on the vote-getting appeal of sound bites rather than the intelligent analysis of facts and figures. Politicians who have mastered the ability to harness public fear have dominated the crime debate, particularly in the United States Senate. They passed a $22 billion omnibus crime bill full of expensive new mandatory minimum sentences, new prison construction, and gimmicks as absurd and constitutionally questionable as life without parole, over 50 new death penalty provisions, and attempts to make it mandatory that 13-year-olds be treated and sentenced as adults for certain crimes. $22 billion. Now let's put that number in perspective and compare what we spend on other things that actually work. For example, all of Head Start, all of the appropriations for Head Start, $3.3 billion. All of Pell Grants, $6.6 billion. $1 billion for Job Corps, $600 million to prevent drug abuse and school dropouts, just under $300 million for child welfare services. Add it all up, that's half of what the Senate wants to spend to prevent crime after it's too late, to prevent our children from getting into crime. If we added summer jobs for every young person that wanted a job, enough recreational opportunities for every person so they would have alternatives to gangs, parental training so our young people would have skills to bring children up right. Add it all up, you couldn't get to $22 billion. Fortunately, the members of the Congressional Black Caucus on the Judiciary Committee, along with other progressive members like Don Edwards, forced reason to prevail over rhetoric. Because our votes were needed to report any bill out of the House, the House only passed those bills that actually had something to do with reducing crime. We funded community police officers. We funded grants for gang prevention programs, funds to make schools safer, drug rehabilitation for state and federal prisoners, funds to support alternative sentences for juveniles, and of course we passed the Brady Bill. The Congressional Black Caucus will be having a hearing next week, Thursday, the 13th of January at 9 o'clock in the morning, to consider the alternatives to the pending crime legislation, and we'll have a 2 o'clock work session on the strategy of what we ought to do. But we need to take charge of the debate because we cannot allow others to dictate what's best just because the polls have told them that one soundbite gets more votes than others. Since nothing is done in a vacuum, we must hold accountable those who propose the irresponsible solutions to crime that take resources away from education, job training, community enrichment programs, which actually could have a positive impact on crime rates. So I look forward to the components of the National Coalition to join us in our efforts at crafting a more responsible policy. We can ill afford to continue along the same path we've been going. Your work will and has been playing a major role, and I encourage you to redouble your efforts throughout the communities across the country to keep this debate focused on constructive crime legislation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Scott. We are rapidly running out of time, and I appreciate the patience of the audience, and I would ask that you stick around for questions at the end. I'd like to next call upon Laura Murphy-Lee, Director of the ACLU in the Washington office.
Thank you, Reverend Jackson, and thank you, members of the panel. I'd like to put the debate on crime in context because we are facing a steamroller when Congress reconvenes on January 24th. I first want to thank Congressman Don Edwards, John Conyers, Bobby Scott, Mel Watt, Craig Washington, Javier Becerra, Jerry Nadler for taking leadership on the House Judiciary Committee, because without those members, many of whom are freshmen, we would have been in a situation where we would have had a crime bill signed into law by this point that would have dramatically changed the way business is conducted in our cities. It would further incarcerate African Americans and Hispanics and Native Americans at disproportionate rates. So I just want to say thank you, and what this conference needs to do is wrap their arms around these gentlemen and talk to them and work with them, because they are up against enormous pressure by the chairman of their committee, Jack Brooks from Texas, to cooperate in producing a crime bill much the same way the Senate produced a crime bill on November 19th, 1993. On November 19th, 1993, the Senate passed omnibus crime legislation, which was a shocking demonstration of excess in a politically charged atmosphere. While a number of proposals do constitute a reasonable attempt to address the problem of crime, many provisions within the bill contain serious civil liberties violations and are completely counterproductive to the goal of reducing crime. On balance, the bill poses too great a threat to civil liberties and must be opposed. Egregious amendments were affixed to an already problematic bill without the benefit of committee hearings, informed discussion, or vigorous debate. There were maybe 2 days of hearings, and those hearings came about in the House Judiciary Committee as a result of the demands of these gentlemen in insisting on 2 days of hearings prior to the markup of the 6 bills. But what you saw happen on November 19th made certain that people in this room could not participate, could not testify. Hearings will be held on health care reform, hearings will be held on welfare reform, but no hearings will be held on crime legislation if the Senate has its way, because crime is the mother's milk of politicians, as Bobby Scott said. And it is being used to whip us and to whip our domestic agenda and reprioritize our domestic agenda away from the programs we know that work. Some of the amendments that were attached include the proliferation of crimes subject to the death penalty, over 50 new death penalties, provisions transferring youth as young as 13 years of age from the juvenile justice system to an already overburdened adult criminal system. And by the way, the sponsor of this amendment was Senator Carol Moseley Braun. There is not unanimity within the African American community or leadership on criminal justice issues, and I'm not afraid to say that. And there's not unanimity in the Democratic Party, and there's not unanimity in the Republican Party. And we have an obligation to invite people in and to talk about it. And I encourage you all to talk to Senator Moseley Braun about this issue. Mandatory life imprisonment for persons convicted of a third drug or violent felony. A proliferation of mandatory minimum sentences and problematic gang provisions. You would not believe what constitutes a gang in the Senate bill. What constitutes a gang in the Senate bill could apply to the Qs, to Delta Sigma Theta. It's people who have initiation rites, who follow a leader, who follow a leader, and maybe 1 or 2 of the members of that group have to engage in a crime in order for the whole group to be called a gang. These are criminal provisions. in a so-called criminal justice bill. The death penalty alone is something that we need to take pause and evaluate. In the last 23 years, we've found that 48 people have been proven to be innocent who are on death row. Guess what the racial composition is of those 48 people? I'm getting a note to wrap up, but I just want to say to you that the American Civil Liberties Union is working with a very, very small coalition of people. There are less than 10 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. who are trying to reduce the bad provisions in the Senate-passed bill. We don't have adequate funding. We don't have adequate troops. We don't have enough people writing letters. We don't have enough people saying that this is an outrage. And this ship is marching on at the price tag of over $22 billion in the trust fund alone. We have responsible alternatives that we've helped craft with members of Congress that would talk about the programs that Congressman Scott talked about, that would fund those programs, and we need your help. We need the message translated to the leadership in the White House and in the Congress, and to friends in our own community, people whom we admire, who are desperate to do something about violent crime, but are flailing their hands in an effort to rush something through. These are ill-conceived, ill-advised proposals. We've got to put a stop to it, and we really don't have much time. Let's not have the fear of crime be the major factor. Instead of being tough or soft on crime, let's get smart on crime. It's our tax dollars that are at risk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lee. I'd like to call on the Honorable Eric Holder, U.S. Attorney General for the District of Columbia.
Thank you. As a judge, I valued brevity, and given the amount of time that we've spent, I will be as brief as I possibly can.
Thank you.
I think we need to look at this problem systemically in a holistic way. Though I agree with just about everything that's been said prior to my starting, I think that people are starting to miss at least one important thing, and I think something that the Attorney General and I, at least here in Washington, are trying to address. I think the problem has to be viewed in two ways. There is a short-term problem that we need to deal with, and I don't think people have spoken about that as yet. The reality is there is a crime problem out there. There is no getting away from the fact, whatever the cause is, that there are substantial numbers of people doing really terrible things to predominantly black people, people of color. We need to address that problem. That is the short-term problem, an enforcement problem. And I think in that regard, more police officers are going to help. Prisons where rehabilitation actually occurs would actually help. And sentences that are proportionate to the crimes that are committed would also help. I think there are provisions in the crime bill, quite frankly, and I'm speaking as an individual now and not as a member of the administration. Parts of that bill are pretty silly. On the other hand, the notion that you incarcerate violent criminals as opposed to those people who are selling drugs to support habits, I think makes a lot of sense. There is also a need for a long-term solution to the problem. And there I think we've got to deal with the problems of jobs, education, and generally training. Unless we deal with the long-term problem, that is the prevention aspect, we're always going to be dealing with the short-term problem. There's always going to be a call for more police officers, more judges, more prosecutors, more jail space. And unless we as a society understand that and deal with the long-term problem, there's always going to be, as I said, a short-term problem we're going to have to deal with. Now, we have something here in D.C. called the Federal Assistance Program that has two components, a short-term component and a long-term one. We're trying to transfer to the district federal resources to help the Metropolitan Police Department deal with the short-term problem, but we've also got the Departments of Education, HUD, HHS, Labor, and various components in the Justice Department dealing with the long-term problem, the prevention aspect, where we're trying to craft with the city government solutions to those long-term problems. It seems to me that prosecutors have to think of themselves nowadays in that way. You've got to think as a good law enforcement person, both short-term and long-term, and craft solutions that will perhaps put us out of a job, hopefully, in the long term, or at least reduce our numbers. But I think that's extremely important because there's clearly a direct link between the social problems that many of our citizens face and the crime problem. There is a direct link. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We need the political will. People on Capitol Hill and Congress and the Senate need guts. And too often they have not displayed the will, the guts that they need to have to stare down people who call for emotional responses to problems that don't need emotional responses. We have to commit ourselves to these long-term things. And that means, Congress comes up for votes. The House of Representatives voting cycle is every 2 years. It means that you're going to have to spend money now for things that might not show results for 5 years, 10 years, and maybe longer than that, but ultimately will work. And it's going to take guts, as I said, for people up on the Hill, our elected representatives, and people here in the City Council to commit themselves to those long-term solutions. I think most people in the areas in which we have most of this violent crime are just like citizens throughout the rest of this country. They want the same kinds of things, and people, I think, sometimes lose sight of that. They want to feel safe and secure in their homes. They want to have good schools for their kids. They want to have jobs. But we also have to understand that there's a small number of people, relatively small number of people, who are violent, who are predatory, and who are beyond hope. And we have to also deal with those people. It's not enough to simply say that we're going to deal with the prevention side. We also have to deal with the immediate problem and try to get, as best we can, some immediate relief to the folks in these areas who, as I said, want to live just like all the rest of us do, without fear. We have to spend money on both. That's the message that I would bring. Simply looking at the prevention aspect or simply trying to be tough on crime as that's used in political ways is not enough. There has to be a commitment. There has to be the will. There has to be an effort by politicians, activists, prosecutors, everybody here to commit ourselves, as I've said on a number of occasions, to short-term and long-term solutions to these problems. We have to be ready to ask ourselves some very difficult questions, and I think we have to be ready to face some hard truths. It's not enough to always blame other people. We have to look within ourselves and within this community, within the black community here in Washington, D.C., and understand that some of the things that we are dealing with are problems that are made by ourselves. We have to be more responsible. We have to deal with problems of teenage pregnancy and other things of that nature if we ever want to get a grip on the crime problem. So as I said, long-term and short-term, that's where we have to look.
Thank you, Mr. Holder. I'd like to call upon Joseph Wright, the Executive Director of the National Organization of Law Enforcement Executives.
Thank you. I would like to thank Reverend Jackson and staff for allowing me the opportunity to visit with you today. I will try not to be repetitive, therefore I will abort my planned presentation and just talk about some other issues. We're romanced weekly regarding taking a position on the crime bill and taking a position that would suggest to certain members of the Congressional Black Caucus that they should be more supportive. We have problems with it for the reasons that have been articulated, although our constituency are indeed black law enforcement executives. We also understand, though, that we have to be realistic. These crimes are predominantly being bestowed upon us, and there are a great number out there, and I have had to face up to that reality. You're simply not going to reform them. And you have to weigh the issue of how much resources we should put into that versus trying to save a kid who's on the borderline. And I think the lady that spoke very eloquently regarding her experiences in certain public housing arenas and the lead paint, et cetera, she indicated there are a lot of resources available for those that have committed a lot of harm, but very little for young adults or youngsters who have committed no harm but needed some help. And I'm of the opinion that this nation is not going to continue to support a system that is neglecting all of us. We have a situation where resources in many respects are getting limited, or we're deciding to limit those resources to us. Just the other day there was an announcement that there will be a proposal presented to save the airline industry. I think there's no greater need with respect to saving our inner cities, and that issue is not being addressed. in a very assertive way. With the issue of drugs, we've talked about that briefly today, but some of my members tell me that half the drugs that's distributed in the inner city are distributed through the means of organized, sanctioned legal methods wherein the government is trying, or its representatives are trying to determine, let's say, the flow of money and the flow of drugs. I suggest that if half the drugs are from that source, we should at least eliminate that half, and I think we would eliminate a half of the problem. Secondly, and to some degree, I'm disagreeing with my dear friend Ron Hampton here regarding community-oriented policing and the historical system that was used. We're of the opinion as an organization that 100,000 new police officers may indeed not change crime in our cities whatsoever, because in many respects, from a management theory, it's all reactionary. That is why we're very assertive in pushing executive training and saying that the police should be involved in preventative endeavors. When I was a young kid, some of you may not know this, Linda Bernard may, I was raised in the streets, and I decided there were certain things I was not going to do. I had to prove that I was strong enough to say no, and sometimes that was through personal fights. But I was proud of the fact that I avoided that conflict, but I understood it. If you don't have the community policing itself, you can put 100,000 police in one city, and it's not going to change crime. But we have to understand that we have to deal with the criminal mind, the criminal behavior, and we have to deal with the mass media situation with respect to certain rap artists or wannabe rap artists. They seem to get record contracts overnight, and they're surely not getting them from us. And they talk about bitches and whores in these songs, and I find it very shocking that we accommodate that. And I find it to be another form of racism wherein we are destroying ourselves while the system, as we describe the system, sit back and let us do it. So in that regard, as the executive director of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, let me say we do indeed feel that there is a need for some form of crime bill, but it has to substantively deal with the issue of negating crime, not reacting to crime. It has to positively deal with enhancing employment and education for black youth, not to just incarcerate more of them, and to prevent the arena in which they get into that situation in the first place. I think I will close at this point in order to save some time for questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Finally, we have the Assistant Chief of the Metropolitan Police of Washington, D.C., William Chavez. And
I will be brief.
And you're on the hot seat.
Yes, I will be brief. Obviously, the police message have been given, not all of which I agree with, but I'll give a different message. I'm kind of optimistic as it relates to crime and violence in the city of Washington, D.C. Some would have you believe that this is the only community meeting that has occurred. These meetings are occurring throughout the city of Washington, D.C. I work in those communities every day, and I see people coming together on a daily basis. So we are coming together as a community. We are coming together as a people to do something about the crime and violence. I wanted to applaud the efforts of Reverend Jackson and the other community members who have gotten together here today. I think it's very necessary. We are very much in support of a lot of the legislation that is taking place as it relates to this bill, in support of police and front side issues, which we feel we need to get a part of and get a handle on. There was a question asked earlier today whether or not there's a correlation between economics and crime and public housing. We found that there's a correlation in crime where it's tolerated within communities, wherever it may be. Even though a lot of crime, 65 to 70%, occur in and around public housing, we found, as Kimmy Gray has mentioned, that where communities do not tolerate crime, they have very successful activities in support of their community. And they bring those public housing complexes and other things into compliance. So you can change some of the makeup of these developments, as we've called them, and do some good things within the community. Just a few facts. We've had 467 murders within the city of Washington, D.C. The average age of victims have been 29 years of age. Crime involving juveniles have increased. 61% of violent crimes have increased 61% involving juveniles. Of the 823 juveniles that we've arrested this year, 528 or 64% were for aggravated assault. There's something happening in our communities which we've got to get a handle on. So I'll just say this to you in closing. Don't look for law enforcement to solve all of these problems. I think we need to come to some consensus that there are some moral issues and other issues out there that have to be directly dealt with by these communities. And as long as we depend on 100,000 more police officers, 25 more police officers, more and harder penalties, we'll be in the same boat 20 years from now, as one of the gentlemen has said earlier. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much. And I know that I promised the audience that that was the last speaker, but we have one more speaker who will be very, very brief so that you will have an opportunity to give your questions. It will, pardon. Okay. All right. The final speaker will be Angela Jordan Davis, Director of the D.C. Public Defender Service.
It sounds like what we're all saying here, we're being a little repetitive, but I think that that sends a clear message too when you have police officers, prosecutors, defenders, lawmakers, and ministers all saying the same thing. Maybe someone will listen. I just want to say that my 12 years as a public defender representing the young men and women who are charged with crime tells me that what's being said here today is absolutely true. There are certain things that I have seen in the past 12 years that have been pretty constant, and that is that the majority of the young men and women that I have represented and people in my office have represented have had literacy problems. They've had very little education and very little hope for education. They've been unemployed and they've had very little and no hope for employment or jobs, that is legal jobs. They've had lack of family structure and lack of able or capable parent or parents, it doesn't have to be two. They've had substance abuse problems, and they've had the inability, and I mean inability, to resolve conflicts in an appropriate way. And what I'm not seeing is, I'm not seeing people who can't be rehabilitated. I'm not seeing people, Eric, who are beyond hope. There are very, very, very few people who are beyond hope. And there are no juveniles, there are no children who are beyond hope. I haven't seen that. And
I would agree with regard to the children. Okay.
Yet we're not seeing the logical responses to these problems. If these are the problems, illiteracy and unemployment and lack of family structure and substance abuse, then why aren't we seeing schools and jobs and help with parenting and more drug programs and more education and conflict resolution? We're not seeing those things. So there's a certain illogic to what's going on, and there's an illogic to this crime bill. The crime bill is basically repeating everything that's been happening in the past 12 years. More law enforcement directed at young black men, more and higher mandatory minimums, more death penalties, longer penalties, more boot camp, new boot camps, old boot camps, more prisons. We're seeing the same things over and over again. They're failed policies. They haven't worked for the past 12 years, so why continue to throw good money after bad? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I just want to say that the problems that bring these young men and women to the criminal justice system are not really criminal problems. They're social and economic problems. That's very clear to me, and so those are the answers. Those have to be the answers. The policies have failed. If incarceration worked, the United States would be the safest place in the world because there's more incarceration here than any place in the world. The answer is so simple. To me, I don't see why other people don't understand it. It's amazing to me that people continue to try policies that have failed. The current policies aren't working. They're far more expensive than the alternatives, and they're destroying an entire generation of young black men, and we have to fight them. All of us have to fight them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davis, and I'd like to thank all of our distinguished panelists for participating in this most important occasion. There is going to be a slight change in the format because we're running a little behind time, and we are going to take the questions, and if you can incorporate your questions that you have with regard to the crime bill into the next session, what can be done to change negative behavior, we would greatly appreciate that. Before we close, though, there were a number of key points that were raised and with respect to this crime bill and what we as a community, as a people, need to do. One Congressman, Bobby Scott, mentioned, and someone else, that there will be hearings next week before Congress reconvenes to continue this dialogue on the crime bill. I think it's very important what Laura Murphy Lee pointed out, that the Senate has not had any hearings. We need to do something to stop the sound bites and to stop the fear that is generated by those politicians who are seeking to be reelected and creating fear where it is unnecessary. Again, I'd like to thank Reverend Jackson and the other organizers of this most important conference this weekend, and we're going to conclude now and ask the next panel to come forward, but just before that, comments from Reverend Jackson.
Brothers and sisters, let me make this kind of special appeal to you. The session coming up is on solutions. We don't want to violate your need to ask questions, but we're trying to honor the next workshop in its leadership, and then a short break for dinner, and then we come back for our last session tonight. So we're not attempting to violate anybody by not having the question part. The real victory in discussing the welfare bill today and discussing the crime bill is to give you an update, a preview on what's coming your way. What happens all too often is that when we find out about Ilani Guinea, it's over. We're usually, because news flows rather slowly out of Washington back to where we come from, when you get the word back in Chicago or Kansas City, as the case may be, it's an after-the-fact situation. So at least we know on the front side that this welfare reform crime bill is the urban policy that's recommended. And so the battle lines have been drawn. And now at the line, we must develop alternatives to the both of them. Again, I would hope that when we conclude our session on tomorrow, there are certain recommendations we want to have come out of here relative to the welfare reform, to the crime bill, to various other initiatives for solutions, and we'll be able to, and Laura Murphy, I hope that you'll really help us with Bobby, kind of size up, you and Don, this crime bill piece so we can handle it a certain kind of way, maybe with Angela. Because when we conclude tomorrow, we want to be able to give people a legislative agenda to take back home so that we can begin to move this thing around the country. Most people are about to sleep this bill. And one reason why we want to have this meeting just after Christmas, just before the King holiday, so when people do the King holiday business around the country, that you have an agenda for the King holiday that is relevant. And this will be, Dr. King would not have been just describing Dream and Precious Lord, though he appreciated it, but he would be discussing the welfare bill, the crime bill, and the need for the domestic Marshall Plan, which was in fact his agenda. Let's express again thanks to our panelists, and my own self, Mayor is here. Mayor Kelly, won't you come right on forward? And our distinguished panel. Congresswoman Maxine Waters, all of you. Give them a hand, will you please? Give them a big hand. You've done a great job.
The police knew who the police were before we got here.
All right. As they come forward, some of you are standing in the back on the right, and there are empty seats on the left. Brothers and sisters, some who are on the right standing, there are some more seats on the left. Eric, let's stay in touch, buddy. That's good stuff you got in it.
I want it. I put it in this.
Quit rubbing on that boy's shoulder. Well, oh wait. Let us be seated. Mayor, where's Mayor Kelly? Mayor? Where's her honor?
I try to come prepared.
And so forth and everything. Mignon, come here, please. Let me have your attention, please. Shh. Let me have your attention. Regina, sit down, please. Brothers and sisters, let me first again, and again, congratulate you for your participation, for your order, and for your discipline. When I asked Bill and Camille some time ago to co-chair a commission on crime and youth violence, he readily agreed to do so. We began to talk about this coming together, and Bill said we should not call this a conference, certainly not a convention, but rather a search session. We're searching for some answers, for some programs, for some truth, because there are some things working in various places around the country, but they're not on the mountaintop, they're in some valley. They need to be projected, and then we need to in fact embrace it because it is working. And so while this is a big panel, we must be, brief because of the time situation. I want to express again thanks to Bill Cosby, who has given of his very personal time, altered a tremendously busy schedule, and Congresswoman Walters just simply turned her schedule upside down because she has some very basic solution-oriented programs, one of which I urge us to consider in our concluding press conference on tomorrow relative to this employment. So this is about the thing of changing negative behavior and programs that work. From the public housing project of Philadelphia, Russell's brother, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. On my left is my boss, Maxine Waters. I just want everybody to know that all day today, people had found a solution to their problem, and I think it was my bank account. And I've never had so many people give me programs and cars, and I try to explain to them that we have to pay taxes with the money we had, and that is our problem, which we have not found a solution for. other than just to pay it. Mrs. Cosby is not here because she's a wife and a mother of some children who can go bad at any time. I will not say that I wish there was some sort of violence in our family, that they wouldn't come back home again. But anyway, we want to get on with this because we have a dinner break. And the idea of all this is you all will listen to not long-winded people, but people who've had a chance to think about something and they got up and they did it and they feel that there is a solution. So, Maxine, would you go ahead?
Thank you very much, Bill. I'd like to just take a moment to thank Jesse Jackson for, again, having the vision and the commitment to convene us. I'd like to thank all of the participants who are here this weekend, and I'm delighted to be a part of this panel. I don't think that I need to moderate as much as I need to share with you some of what we have been attempting in Los Angeles. You will have wonderful speakers here today who have examples of programs that are indeed working. And I do think we need to spend some time concentrating so that we can duplicate these programs and ideas when we go back to our communities. I'd like to tell you about something called 17 to 30. The 17 to 30 program is a program that we came up with in Los Angeles. We introduced it in Congress. We caused a real debate in Congress about this type of program. We've ended up getting some funding for the program. It's in the regulation development stages at this point, but it's a mere $50 million for all of the United States of America, and by the time you apply for it in your cities, you may be able to get $1 million or $2 million in some of the cities. We have gone beyond the government possibilities into the private sector. I just completed a meeting with representatives from the record industry prior to coming, and just confirmed a commitment of about $17 million to take care of a program that will cover 5,000 youth in Los Angeles. Let me tell you about the program. We discovered over a number of years, working with young people in housing projects in Los Angeles, working on the streets of Los Angeles, following the rebellion in Los Angeles, we discovered and we've learned that there are thousands upon thousands of young people hanging on America's corners. We see mostly black and Latino males on the corners. They're jobless. Many of them dropped out of school when they were 15 years old or so. Some of them are now 25 or 30. They've been on America's streets for 10 years or more, without jobs, without job training. We particularly targeted the Florence, Normandy area where the the Reginald Denny incident took place. Young people there were being touted as thugs and crooks and criminals, and we went to see and to talk. What we found when we went there were the same young men that you see up in Harlem, that you see in the Bronx, that you see in St. Louis and Pittsburgh, basically falling in the 17 to 30 category, who live nowhere oftentimes. Some live in housing projects. They live from grandmother to girlfriend, live with somebody on welfare. They live where they can. They hustle the streets. They sell a little crack. They do whatever they do to survive. We believe it is this population that's causing us problems in America, wreaking havoc on America, and nobody knows what to do. We coined the 17 to 30 program after going to Florence, Normandy. We said to the young people there, what do you want to do? Do you want to continue to just hang? What would you like to do? They mumbled, they wanted to get a trade, they wanted to go to school. If somebody would only help them, they didn't know what was going on. We literally sent our staff back, put them in the car, and signed them up at the Maxine Waters Employment Preparation Center, one of our regional vocational education programs. But we went further than that. We decided we were going to supply a stipend. Not a lot of money, but something that could deal with lunch money and haircuts and basic necessities.
We started to give out $50 a week to a population of just 15 young men who had not been doing anything, had not been in school. $50 has worked miracles. Not only have we been able to retain them in school, some have graduated and they're now enrolled in El Camino College, others are on jobs, and we discovered that not only $50, but special attention by way of case management, so that they have somebody to call. And do we get the calls, and did we get the calls for long periods of time? We go to court, we talk with probation officers, we talk with parole officers, but more than that, with the $50 stipend, we help them to come from the fringes and to become persons. They didn't have ID, they didn't have driver's license. Many of them had been driving without licenses, they had warrants. Whenever they hit the streets and they were on for 4 or 5 days or a week or two, they were going to get picked up all over again. And so now we found out what we had to do. We had to get them Social Security cards. We had to teach them about the systems of America that nobody has taught them about. We helped them to get ID. We discovered a program with the courts of Los Angeles where you can work off your warrants by doing community service time. We take bus loads of 50 or more. After we work it out with the judges, we present them, they compile all of their warrants, we get them assigned to our community services program, they work off the warrants. We did this with the guys we were working with, so all of a sudden you had young people anywhere from 17 to 25 years old or so, enrolled in vocational education. Now they have Social Security cards. Now they have ID. We've got some that now even have bank cards. But this is a kind of work that must be done to mainstream many of the young people who are on America's corners. The $17 million that we've gotten a commitment for will be applied to the same program, but we're expanding. We're going to get 5,000 off of Los Angeles streets. We're going to work with the Crips and the Bloods and the 8 Trays and the 5 Deuces and all of them who are on the corners out there organized in gangs, loosely, what have you, who have nothing. Nobody. Many of the children or young people that we've worked with, we did discover precisely what Jesse Jackson talked about. Some have parents who are on drugs. Some have been reared literally in crack houses almost. Some of them have parents, 2 of them in prison, etc., been fending for themselves. I don't want anybody telling me that these young people better act responsibly. They don't know anything about responsible. They're acting out what they know to do. They have not been reared in the way America tells us we're all reared. Many of them have been rearing themselves. Many of them have been living, doing whatever they could do. What are we going to do with the $17 million? It's very easy. $5,000, $50 a week, 1 year, stipends. Social workers or case managers, many of whom have been laid off in the probation department, parole department, $35,000 a year contractors. We will divide up the $50,000 into groups of 50. A case manager will have a caseload of 50. That case manager's responsibility is to track 50 young people for 1 year. They have the responsibility of making sure that they're in school, they're enrolled where they're supposed to be. It can be in vocational education, it can be in high school, it could be for literacy training, it could be GED, we don't care where it is, as long as they're enrolled to improve their skills, to get something under their belt, to move toward job training, to be involved in changing their lives. The case manager will have the responsibility that usually families have in socializing. They will not only keep up with them, they will meet with them once a week in the group. That group will be anchored at a church or a public place that's got some space. None of the money that we're putting together will go for overhead or computers or any of that crap. The money has to go for direct services. The $50 is key to what we're doing. The case managers will work from their homes. They don't need an office. We will install a telephone for each case manager, and the child or the 50 in that case group will have access to the case manager. The case manager will not only meet with them once a week at the anchor church, The case managers have to be creative. Not only will they try to get churches to adopt their 50 so they can add to the $50 or add resources for trips, for transportation, for clothing, for other kinds of things, the case managers will have the responsibility to amass all of the resources that are supposed to be available out there to impact these young people's lives. If these young people were in the mainstream, they would be using these schools. They would be using the health clinics. They would be using the resources, so we don't have to duplicate this and create other resources. We want the case managers to teach them how to use the resources that should be there, available for them, that they have not been using. The case managers will have the responsibilities to keep the files on 50. When they're not meeting with them in the group meetings, all the rest of the week, they will be meeting with them one-on-one. They will be going to the schools. They will be meeting with the probation officers, with the parole officers. They will make sure the health needs are being taken care of. We discovered there were young people who had never seen a doctor since they've been born. We discovered that there are young people who have learning problems, who can't hear, all kinds of things. We're going to use the resources that are already there. That's what social work is about. That's what case management is about. We've done away with social workers in this country, made them think that their jobs are not honorable. We use eligibility workers in the social work system that has nothing to do with case management. You can't do this work without case management. We're recruiting the social workers. We need 100 of them for the 5,000 population for 50 each. It's very simple. That's what it's all about. With the 15 or so that we worked with, where we gave the stipends, we raised the money in my women's group, we paid the $50, it worked miracles. $50 says, I care about you. One kid told me, you would give me $50 a week? He said, do you know that's $200 a month? And then I realized that he'd come from a welfare family and they only got about $400 a month. So I was going to give to one person almost 50% of what he had been given, what he knew about in his family. The other thing the $50 does, aside from the real thing of providing lunch money and car fare and transportation costs, it really does say, I care enough about you to share some resources with you, to understand something about what it takes to eat, how I can help pay for lunch money for you. We're going to try this. We have moved from the public sector. We've gotten what we think we can get out of government. The arguments are going to be there forever about the deficit and what they can do and what they won't do, and I have to fight with right-wing crazies about what this money is going to be used for. On the floor of Congress, they said the kids were going to buy beer with it. They were going to do all kinds of things. I fought that battle, and I may keep fighting that, but I've gone to the private sector, I've gone to the entertainment industry, and I want you to know I'm going to be working with some of the young people that some of you may be afraid of. I'm not afraid of Snoop Doggy Dogg. I'm not afraid of Dr. Dre. I'm not afraid of Ice Cube. I'm not afraid of any of them. I want this work to be transforming for them also. I'm going to use their money. I'm going to bring them in. I want them to be involved in processing these kids, but I want them all year long. I don't want them just singing about the hood and talking about what they're going to do for the brothers in the hood and the homeboys. I'm going to show them how to do something with their money for the homeboys. I'm going to involve them. I'm going to involve them and their money, and I'm going to embrace them. And I hope that this work is going to take the edge off, and it's going to create some responsibility. It would be easy to fight with them. It would be easy to have a confrontation with them. I don't like some of the words they use. I don't like some of the portrayal in the media, but to tell you the truth, I've been hearing the words for a lot of years. I hear them from a lot of us who claim we can't stand, we hear them now. There's got to be some honesty and some real truth that's going on with us and this problem that we're confronted with. So I'm going to leave it at that. I've taken enough time. This is something that we have constructed in the best way that we know how. We think it has possibilities. Watch us. Take this idea with you and see what you can do with it.
That's all the time we have for this evening. We all we all have a program. Everybody with a program, throw your program out. And that's the way we're going to work it. We're going to adopt the program, and everybody go out and do it.
Handouts.
Yes, but you have it upside down.
Well, I can't read.
Like Dr. Dre teach you that?
That's right. I'd like to ask you to pass these out.
Yes, they are. I passed them out.
Okay.
Everybody, as they say in the church, everybody have one.
Okay.
Now, would you please announce our next long-winded speaker?
You know, that's the quickest I've ever done the idea.
You're kidding.
Yes.
Good God.
Okay, let's see. Who do we have? We have Dr. Lucy Perez, who will be our next speaker. Where is Dr. Perez?
Due to the other people on this panel, I will really be very, very short. There are a couple of concepts, though, that I want to discuss about that work. And one concept is that of comprehensive generic prevention. And I think we hear it over and over and over and over and over again. The risk factors that we hear associated with violence, the risk factors associated with teenage pregnancies, the risk factors associated with HIV disease, the risk factors associated with illiteracy and homelessness, all of that tend to be the same ones. However, we've begun to look at them in categories. And just as Maxine Waters pointed out, we need to take a comprehensive approach to that. And so that's one of the points, that's one of the issues. And from a federal standpoint or a funding standpoint, it's important for us to get away from categorical funding. The second issue that I find and I feel that works that's important is the issue around health care. And it is not the only answer, as we have heard so eloquently several times here today. But there is the component of confidentiality. And starting many of the school-based clinics in New York City, it was an issue when we had adolescents and young adults and children come in and have the opportunity to begin to really talk about what was bothering them. When we talk about school-based health clinics, we also, as a physician, I get the opportunity to see a young person, a child, an adolescent, a young adult from many different eyes. Begin to put together a plan. It's not just a physician seeing them, but I get the opportunity to see how their peers see them, to see how their teachers see them, and to see how they function within their community. And then the third, and that goes back to the basis, and we've heard it over and over and over again, and we have been convened by a minister, and it starts in Proverbs. And I read one chapter, there are 31 of them, and I read one chapter a day. And God says over and over, get wisdom, get understanding. And I think that through that process, and that wisdom is our fear of God, and that understanding is our understanding of God, and He gives us two commandments. One is that we love Him, her, with everything. And then that there isn't anything left if we consume ourselves with that type of love. And the second being that we love one another. Those two. So those are the things that have worked for me with my adolescents, that I show them that I love them unconditionally. I have the time to talk with them. I will sit down, and that has worked.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Before we go any further with presenters, it is important for us to understand that someone who has been working with various solutions, who have been trying everything that anybody could try to deal with one of America's most difficult problems, is with us today. And It is not simply about looking at a city and talking about what should be done. You need to know how tough this work is. We have the mayor, Washington, D.C., who's with us. Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly, would you please share with us your thoughts on these issues?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I want to begin by also saying to our distinguished leader, Reverend Jesse Jackson, I want to thank you, Jesse, for pulling us all together. I have, I guess, many thoughts raced through my mind as we come together at this panel, but I shall also err towards brevity. I think that there are two ways we've got to address it, two things that I think that have proven to have some effectiveness, but neither of which have been truly as effective as they need to be, because as of to date, there is yet to be a real collective will across this country to do either with any real sense of urgency and any real sense of commitment. The first one is under the catch-all phrase of prevention. Prevention essentially is something where we deal with the reality that our young people are living in a world where there's no sense of family, no sense of community, and no sense of neighborhood as we used to know when we were coming up. So what are we talking about for prevention? They come into a world where there's no prenatal care, no early childhood development, no nutrition, no preschool, any kind of nurturing, no structure too often, even in their school system, or no after-school structure as well. And so what we are trying to do, and through our own youth initiative program, we're trying to fill the void for all of that. But the reality of it is, there used to be a time when everybody in all of the community, the church leaders, the school teachers, the neighbor on the corner, all helped to play a role in that process. And because that is not a part of the world of our children anymore, that's not a part of the experience of anymore, we are trying to fill that void through government programs. Government can play a role, but government alone cannot do it. We have got to rekindle a sense of community. When people come out and do more than offer a program, but make a personal commitment to our young people and personally invest in something and get in their lives, that's when we see transformation. That's part of what Maxine is talking about. We each say it, but the problem is that we could get the same gathering as we have here today to a mentoring program. We could start making a dramatic dent in the problem all across our communities. The second issue is law enforcement. It would be impossible for me as a mayor, having seen 467 people killed in the District of Columbia this last year, to ignore law enforcement. I just called the parents of a 16-year-old who was a high school honor student at Banneker, whose child is still in intensive care because her boyfriend tried to kill her. Just this week, we in the District of Columbia buried a 25-year-old police officer. And so it goes day after day. We cannot responsibly address this issue if we only talk about prevention and do not deal with law enforcement. But let me be very clear in closing. Law enforcement for me is not what you traditionally hear. We have a drug industry in this country that is a part of the American economy. It crisscrosses America. We have the equivalent of a pyramid system. And we have experts who come into our communities and take advantage of gangs that have always existed since the beginning of time, and basically manipulate our children to being pawns in an economic process. These drugs enter this country at numbers you cannot believe, virtually unchecked each and every day.
Come on.
And people launder that money, and these are the people who wear suits and say they are part of America's legitimate businesses, and nobody does anything about it. And let's not ignore the availability of guns in this country. It is a part of the capitalist system. And we do nothing about the guns that are made available to 11 and 12 years old. And the reality of it is that we're now seeing 11 and 12-year-old children who have the possession of guns that would cost us $400. Why are they gaining possession, and how are they gaining possession of guns that would cost $400? Unless they mean to create chaos and deflect our attention away from the serious criminal enterprise that has gotten a grip on this country, and so that we cannot have time to deal with it.
That's what I'm saying, man. It's real conflict.
Unless we talk about law enforcement beyond the typical picture you see on the 6 o'clock news of a young black man being carried off in handcuffs, unless we deal with the serious enterprise that deals with levels well beyond that, and have a commitment beyond one local law enforcement agency, our children see through us. They know what is going on. They understand their pawns in the process, and we will never have their respect unless we get up off the dime and start doing something about it.
But how do you really feel?
What can be done to change negative behavior? There are some people who started their own programs, who took it upon themselves to just get out there and try and do whatever they could. One such person is with us today. I'd like to call on him next, Mr. Kent Amos.
Thank you, Congresswoman Waters, to my mayor, Madam Kelly, to Mr. Cosby and others distinguished panelists, and those of you who are present. The mayor talked a little bit about the pain associated with this equation. Maxine suggests that we did something about what confronted us. And one thinks about what works. That is not a hard question to answer. What works today has worked for some time, caring about children. The question is, do we have the will to change our behavior to do that? I was faced with the proposition some 13 years ago now of what to do about your child who was going into the 11th grade, who had become surrounded by young men and young women who clearly had come from a different course to get to the same place and time. I was faced with the proposition of, do I continue my escalation in on the corporate ladder, or do I spend time with my child? I made the decision to spend time not only with my child, but my child's friends. So when those boys came into my home, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was scared. Let me tell you, when 3 boys walk into your home, all of whom are better than 6'4", all of whom had been in jail, all of whom had problems, you are scared. But my fear was not personal. My fear was what was going to happen to my child. And I could have run. I could have taken my corporate executive seat and gone someplace and run, but how can I run from a child? So I adopted those 3 boys, took them into my home, and cared for them the same way I did for my own child. But when you realize that you now have 4 boys instead of 3, you often have to surround them. And what happened was, in a very short period of time, I had a house full of children. Yeah, I went from 3 boys to 9 boys in a matter of 6 months. And 9 to 11, and 11 to 22. 22 teenagers in your home every single day for 3 years, let me tell you. Let me tell you, I'm not going to talk about what it costs to feed them, because it costs a lot. I'm not going to tell you what it costs to spend the hours and day in and day out. And I'm going to tell you, when I come home from work on those days, I'm going to tell you, I was tired. Spend the hours and day in and day out. And I'm going to tell you, when I come home from work on those days, I'm going to tell you, I was tired. And I didn't feel like coming home to 22 children in your house. But what are you going to do? We really have a real simple question to ask each of us. what are you going to do? This ain't about what we can do, what this world can do, how much money somebody can give us. That's not how I got here. What worked for me and many of us in this room was somebody took time to care. Uncle Joe, for me, cared about me. Uncle Joe was a man who lived in the apartment down below me, not just my father, who happens to be a lawyer, or my mama, who just happened to be a school teacher, but Uncle Joe's who I wanted to grow up like. Why? Because Uncle Joe met me every single day when I came home from school. And I didn't realize the reason why Uncle Joe could meet me every single day when I came home from school, because he was a sanitation worker, and he was home early. But Uncle Joe met me with a smile and a handshake and said, "Boy, tell me what you did today." So now when I went home, I found 22 kids. I'd have to ask each of them, "Child, what you do today?" But it doesn't just stop there. We keep talking about the violence of this thing. Well, we understand that our children are growing up with inadequate language skills, inadequate analytical skills, inadequate interpersonal skills, inadequate computing skills, and they're not going to get that unless we spend the time to translate the myriad of data that they're faced with on us every single day. And I could tell you the real reason why I'm here today is because I have experienced joy. Yeah, I've experienced the joy of seeing 35 of my children graduate from college. Yeah. Yeah, you see, I adopted 87 children and took them into my house over the last 12 years. Every single day. Spent my entire wealth. I don't know about what you got, Mr. Cosby, but I don't have nothing. And I took them in. And the real question became, really is, what do you do? And yeah, it is a pleasure to see 6 of your children become salutatorians and 5 valedictorians. It is a pleasure sometimes to have 29 in college right now. But that's not really what brings me here today. What brings me here today is the pain of Andre. Young boy who comes into your home carrying a gun. Young boy dealing with drugs. And your other children tell you, "Dad, Mr. A, Andre's in the life. What are you going to do?" You care about him just like you do the rest of them. And you surround Andre with your love. And you know what happens just before Thanksgiving? He comes to you and tells you, "Dad, I want this world, not that one," and gives you his gun. You say, "All right, son, let's see what we can do." The problem is he's witnessed a homicide. The problem is that he now is a part and accomplice of a homicide. So Daddy tells your son, "You gotta stand up to it, son. Meet your responsibility." February, I get a phone call after he trimmed my Christmas tree. February, I get a phone call. "Mr. Amos, come to Howard University Hospital. Your boy is laying on a hospital slab." I served this nation in Vietnam. Bullets are not new to me. Death is not new to me. Killing is not new to me. But what was brand new to me was to see your son laying on a morgue slab. There is no kind of pain that gets to you just like that. If it was only Andre, I maybe would not be here today. But all too unfortunately, that phone call has come again to come see Ernie laying on a playground, having been stabbed to death over a basketball. What is wrong with a society that finds the resources to do this and not the time to care for a child? I had the occasion some 3 years ago to be in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Urban League Convention. And a young boy, 19 years old, was the one to introduce me. He said, "Mr. Amos, would you mind if I spent a few minutes with the audience?" I said, "Go right ahead, son." And he said to that audience, he says, "May I ask you to give me one thing?" And like this assemblage, there was the power in that room to give that child virtually anything he wanted. And he knew that. And he asked that assemblage, "Would you grant me one wish?" And then somebody said, "Go ahead, son." He said, I'm a student in college and I need tuition money. People start ducking their heads. But he said, I'm not going to ask you for tuition. He said, I'll get that. He said, I ride my bicycle to school every day, past the young boys driving BMWs and Mercedes, and I need a car. And people really start getting nervous then. He said, but I'm not going to ask you for that. He said, what I really want is to see my brother smile. We couldn't do that for him, for you see, his 15-year-old brother had been gunned down just 3 months earlier. He said, but instead of that, because by that time everybody wanted to give him what he wanted, and since we couldn't, he said, in lieu of that, give me your time, your legacy, and your commitment. That young boy has prescribed for us what we must do. We must give children our time, our commitment, and our legacy. That ain't hard. We all have 24 hours in a day. Anybody in here got any more? I'd like to talk to them. We all have 24 hours. The question is how you spend it. And it's given to you free. We all can decide what we want to commit ourselves to. That's our choice to make. And it seems to me that Harriet Tubman, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin, and the pantheon of heroes have prescribed for us the legacy. If you think we are afraid, can you imagine what Harriet must have thought about when they called her Moses and walked the backwoods? We don't know fear. Can you understand what it must have been like when Mary McLeod Bethune found children who couldn't read and created a university? How can we, with all our capacity, not take time to educate our children? And we at the Urban Family Institute have ways to put that together. And we're in communities, 1,000 children at a time. This notion of trying to fix this thing at 20 or 30 kids at a time is a joke. The numbers are flat out too big. 87 children, yes. And that's because I tried to save 2, my son and my daughter. But let me tell you, it's a joke. Because they still have to go into the world to produce Anthony, the most recent of my tragedies, 22 years old this year, took a .45 to his chest and blew himself away. That to me says that I failed. That says that I couldn't find a way of getting to my child enough hope to not take himself out of this world like this. What I come to you today as a parent, as a father, one who has experienced pain, and beg you to try and find a way to stop the pain.
I don't know if anybody really wants to follow this, unless you have more children than Mr. King. Somebody got 105 children that just happened to pick up off the street. Then anyway, Earl B. King, would you please just, how many children have you? One, all right. You speak quickly. And is it alive?
Yes, he is. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to give all honors and due respect to our Lord Savior, which is God Almighty. I would like to also look in the audience and thank those who are here today representing the Rainbow Coalition with the Reverend Jesse L. Jackson, who has put on not a display, but who has put on a serious a very serious program that is working, because you see the people here that are working in the system. I'd like to thank Bill Cosby and all, Maxine Waters and Mayor Pratt and all the other conveners. I only have one child, and he's 22 months old, Earl B. King II. And pain, when you bear it, you can share it. But I'll start off by just saying that very briefly, I grew up in Chicago on the South Side. I grew up in a gang, as a gang leader at one time. But I found someone that cared about me as well. And he was a school teacher. And I directed my energies into playing basketball, where I became one of Chicago's best, and went on to college at North Texas State, and then into the pro arena. But that didn't mean anything to me, because once I finished the pro arena, I came back home and I saw a lot of my friends freebasing cocaine and doing drugs. A lot of them that I thought would be lawyers and doctors, they were freebasing cocaine. I waited till I got over age 30. And yes, I was influenced, and peer pressure can work even on you then, even tougher. And I fell victim to freebasing cocaine and crack for 14 months. It got to a point where I lost my entire family, my 5 sisters, because my mother and father are deceased. I grew up on welfare, but welfare didn't grow up in me. I had an education, but then again, when you have drugs flowing through the community where you know that, yes, someone said that black folks don't own airplanes and they don't bring the drugs over here. I'll say that people like Bill Cosby can own an airplane, but he's not the pilot that brings them to our community. I'll say also that the vessels that you see in the ocean that comes through here, the vessels that you see come through here, they don't have black navigators who are bringing drugs into our community. This is a big problem. It has cost us life after life after life. When you look at the business of drugs, as Mayor Pratt Kelly has put it very bluntly, that's over $100 billion business in our country. And in the state of Illinois alone, $7.5 billion of drug sales is measured every year. I look at the brothers and the sisters that they say are gangbangers and drug dealers who drive up and down in the BMWs and Mercedes with gold chains on, and they say they are the problem. And I look at the 11 and 12 and 13-year-old young kids that are carrying Uzis, and they say they are the problem. But when this country has the biggest business in the world, which are guns, and the second biggest business in the world, which is drugs, then we have to take a quick look at education and the jobless situations that we're in. I didn't go to a rehab, nor did I go to a counselor to get off of cocaine or drugs. What I did was I dropped on my knees and I got tired and I asked God for the answer. I gave him my life and I said, either show me a better way or take my life. That's when No Dope Express Foundation was birthed. And for the 7.5 years that we've been born now, we're on the cutting edge of doing things that are positive in our communities. We have a peace treaty, which people say, oh, it never worked in government today. But to the government officials, we know that it's working because we are the surrogate fathers and surrogate brothers and sisters and mothers that those kids need who are there at home without parents. So someone has to take up the time and care because they too, yes, they're human beings. When I can look on television and C-SPAN and I can look all over the news and the media and see that Ray Bean and Yasser Arafat can sign a contract of peace on the White House lawn and they can take billions of dollars back to a foreign country and rebuild it, then there's a government in the ghetto that needs the same support and needs the same caring, and we got to start doing that. Those are just some of the things I wanted to say, and I'm going to be very brief with the rest of this in conclusion in saying that I met another very spiritual man. His name is Reverend Dr. Ben Chavis of the NAACP, who has been very, very brilliant out on the forefront and the cutting edge of trying to stop gang violence and helping with the solutions that we have to say he's committed. We don't need a whole lot of money to stop us from killing each other. What we need is love and a shoulder to lean on and someone that cares and that can come here today and that can say things to testify that in God we trust, we mean no dope for us, but the guns in our community that are destroying our kids and destroying our families, it has to cease. The programs that No Dope Express Foundation we have just been blessed 2 years ago with a center. It's a multi-educational recreational center. It has an indoor swimming pool, jacuzzi, a track, a gymnasium, and all those things. Also has tennis courts, football field, and baseball diamond, but that's recreation. What we have to deal with that, we deal with leadership building within the family and the community, which is very important. Outpatient treatment, prevention, and intervention programs, which is also very important. Literacy programs, educational workshops, seminars, and training programs. A 12-step philosophy and recovery program that works. So I tell you today in closing that we are very serious about the business of shutting down dope houses and building up schools and education, because when the Wall Street Journal can have it to where it says that $30,000 can be for incarceration, but it only takes $13,000 to get an education at Duke, who are we fooling? In closing, in care of all of that, Dr. Chavez, as I said his name a minute ago, has committed to raise millions of dollars to help us renovate that complex and to bring valuable programs for a model program for the country to see. Yes, Mr. Cosby said that people were here and they were asking him for money. But I tell you, Big Bill is not the only one that people are asking for money. What we're asking Big Bill of is to share what and challenges he had, how he made his money. That's what they need to see. That's what they need to hear. That's what they need to feel. That's what they need to touch. My constitution is to the entire congregation of the Rainbow Coalition and to all of you. In God we trust, no dope for us. This is no joke. We mean no dope. Now is the time to say no to crime. Let's regain our fame and say no to gangs. To some of those that we chose, listen close, will be your host that expresses changing minds. You see, it takes more than a Bill Cosby and a Reverend Jesse Jackson and a Maxine Waters and a Sharon Pratt Kelly and a Benjamin Chavez to turn zeros into heroes. It takes all of you in here. And to all of our parents and adults out there, we urge you to. Let's end the mugs. Let's stop the thugs. Let's all give hugs and say no to drugs. You see, it is as simple as 1, 2, 3. Our kids, including me and all of us, should be drug-free. Use soap, not dope. Stay clean. I'm Earl King. Thank you. Right now, I would like to introduce another close friend of mine that grew up together with me. And when people talk about gang members and gang bangers, we're building nations. This gentleman needs no introduction. But before I introduce him, I'd like you still to know that we have some members here from the Black Disciple Nation, and that's Minister Fontaine, and he's in the back, and Coleman Lawton, Michael Dortch. But Gator Bradley is a man on the cutting edge. Wallace Gator Bradley is a man who says it like it is. And Wallace Gator Bradley, who's united in peace for all of you, will tell you what he can do and what he is doing. Wallace Bradley. Thank you.
Thanks, Brother Earl. Wallace Bradley, Gator who? I did 4 years in a day in Stateville Penitentiary. Former enforcer for, yeah, that's it, right? That's my mellow, Bill. You better get it back on, Bill. Yeah. They used to run like that, but then they ran from Moses too for a time, right? I did 4 years in a day in Stateville Penitentiary. Armed robbery, a former gang enforcer for the Gangster Disciples. Now I'm an advocate for growth and development up under the leadership of Larry Hoover, a brother that's been locked up for 20 years in Stateville Penitentiary. Like a lot of brothers that's in the penitentiaries across this nation, that's willing to do something positive since Reverend Jackson has told them they must be accountable to bring an end to the death and mayhem that's being played in our community. And these brothers that have 100 years in the penitentiary and that's in the leadership mode of these gangs are now telling their membership that they must adhere to the responsibility that Reverend Jackson and Ben Chavez and the likes have put upon them. So my enforcement now is to make sure that they do them things, that they honor the women on these streets, that they don't disrespect the children or abuse the children, that they don't rob and rape senior citizens, that they register and vote, and that they not be illiterate. So now I'm an enforcer of making sure that we become responsible citizens within the cities and across America. Secondly, I got executive clemency, Brother Bill, from the governor with the help of Jesse Jackson and Reverend Willie Burrell. So
I forgot to mention Brother Louis Farrakhan.
Right. Hey. But what we've been able to do with the help of Mr. Farrakhan, Prince Asiel, Ben Chavis, Reverend Jackson, we had a summit in Chicago where we brought 12 nations, because we no longer call them gangs. Nations have to assume responsibility. So since we enter this, how do you change their behavior pattern? You have to give them a responsibility. We represent in this Uniting Peace, which is the button that you see that I wear, over 310,000 gang members in city of Chicago. Blackstone Rangers, Vice Lords, Black Disciples, Gangster Disciples, Black Souls, El Rukins, Cobras. They all came together for peace October 25th last year in Cabrini Green, because we heard on public radio a young lady by the name of Marion Stamps say, "Where are the brothers?" Evidently they have no nuts and no guts to try to stop the killing of these mothers' babies on the streets. So we came together. And as of this day, there hasn't been a gang-related shooting or killing in Cabrini Green. I'm here. These are not my statistics. The crime rate in Chicago has came down 27% without the help of Mayor Daley, without the help of Egan. Okay? The murder rate this year compared to last year has came down 10% without their help. They're more fighting us for trying to bring peace about in our community. And that's what frightens me more than anything. When a lie can go around the country that says if you turn your lights out on your car, a gang member will kill you, and then we find out that the lie was sent by a fax from the Chicago FBI office, that's what you got to be afraid of. When you can see today that the same man that arrested Noriega pleads guilty and get a 2-year sentence for stealing $700,000, that's what you got to be worried about. Okay? When you see that the drugs being brought into our community by the CIA in the 90s, not in the 60s and the 70s, into our community, that's what we got to be worried about. But the change of behavior is for the youth to know, because we're going to send a tape back of this conference through the penitentiaries so that they know that there's people here that care if you're going to assume the accountability to change your life around for our people. Okay? I don't mean to scream, I just get heated. Okay? When the brother Larry Hoover wrote a letter from the penitentiary asking all the gang leaders to assume those responsibilities, it meant a lot, because no longer can anybody that violate this peace hide in no jail cell, hide in no penitentiary, and it will not be covered by no gang member or nation leader on the streets. We turn them over to the community. We deal with the African American Patrolman League. We deal with the Alphas, we deal with the Kalphas and all them all. We deal with the Masons, we deal with everybody. We deal with the churches. Any church can call Operation Push and say they got a problem on any corner, not just in Chicago, in the state of Illinois. Give us an address and there won't be no problem. I'm telling you, it's real. I'm not bragging, I'm just stating the fact. When it was a serial killer running loose in the Chatham area, which is the most influential area within the city of Chicago, Reverend Willie Burrell came to the brothers and sisters in the street to march around City Hall because the mayor didn't think it was important to have the superintendent of police come and address that problem. But they'll send the Secret Service and the CIA and the FBI and the XYZ, everybody to public housing to move on us as a race of children, of people. And we marched around, we went to City Hall, and we got the superintendent, and he came. Make a long story short, there's no longer a serial killer running loose in the Chatham area. We came together and we got involved and decided to put down the bullets and pick up the ballot, and so we created 21st Century Vote, which is happening now. When Willie Burrow had us march around City Hall, the youth was serious because they was here trying to chase a killer out of their community, so therefore they found responsibility and acceptability to wanting to live. Okay? And they was hurt because as we sung, "We shall not be moved," they didn't know the words to the song. I'm not lying. But Reverend Burrow said, "Come to push that following side and you will learn it." And they came. When Reverend Jackson asked them to come and put down their guns and make their commitment to not be about drugs, he said, "Turn in no guns." When this man in New York, it's a good plan. Turning your guns for toys, then you come to find out he don't turn in his gun. I'm just facting with what I ain't got no PhD, I got my GED from Stateville, but I did learn how to read. And one thing I learned from Reverend Jackson, they can't say he put nothing up because he put it in their face. I didn't say it, Washington Post said it. I say this because they raised me and pushed, man. Okay? And what we have to give back is what Jesse and Jerry Butler gave me. Is a chance. I became Jerry Butler's campaign manager. They said, "But Jerry, he's a gangster." And Jerry said, "Well, he was a distributor of beer at that time." So he came back, he gave me my chance, made me a campaign manager, became his administrative assistant. And he ended up being, I'm coming with it now, Bill. I'm saying this to say, really, I'm saying this to say, and I'm going to cut it off. The same warden that locked me up and put me in the hole, my job was to go back and check him and investigate him and end up charging him $1,000 a day because he still had women in the penitentiaries in the jailhouse too, laying on the floor. Just saying about change. If we all just give, and make the one we give, we can give our way out of the solution instead of trying to build penitentiaries out of the solution. That's what I'm saying. Therefore.
No more therefore. There's no more therefore. And I know I'm ready to go to prison now. You make another long speech like that, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm just walking in there to get away from you, Gator. I hope that an awful lot of the people around understand and can feel and see. What is your real name, sir?
Wallace Bradley.
Wallace Bradley. That Wallace Bradley is probably the result of some people just grabbing Wallace. Right. But I met an old couple in the south of France, and they had a very successful son. He was successful because he brought the mother and father to the south of France. And I've been a parent that long, you see. And my wife and I inquired these people, and we said, what did you do that made this child of yours so wonderful? And the mother said, all we know is there's a little bit of his father in him, and there's a little bit of his mother in him, and there's a whole lot of him. So, Mr. Bradley, some people came and got you, but those of us who are parents, I think the one thing that we all live with that comes to haunt us is an old, old phrase. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And one, you drunk? You certainly did drunk. and regardless, sir, you will never know how important that is until you become a parent. Some of them you can't even get to the water. All right, now let me move on to, I hope I'm correct here, Miss Claudine Taft. Is that correct? All right.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Black Student Leadership Network. I am presently in my second year of teaching at Rolling Terrace Elementary School here in Maryland and Montgomery County. I'm grateful to take part in this discussion on viable programs that are trying to change negative behaviors. I was fortunate enough to be part of a program this past summer, that is bound to make great strides in the positive development of our children. This program was the 1993 Freedom Schools program. I was also fortunate to be part of the original founding members of the Black Student Leadership Network in June 1991, when we were brought together on behalf of the Black Community Crusade for Children at Howard University. It was from that core of 40 students that is now enlarged to about 500 members across the country that brought this dream of Freedom Schools to life. The enhancer of the Freedom School concept was the Ella Baker Child Policy Training Institute. We got together for a second convening in Atlanta in March of 1992, and we decided that one of our areas that we wanted to focus on as youth, helping youth, was education. And we knew it was a problem because if we weren't in the schools where the education was supposed to be taking place, that I've learned now in my second year of teaching that it doesn't really take place as well as we think it is, that there was something else we had to do. We had to get the kids at the time when they weren't in school. And in reference to a comment that was made by the Reverend Jesse Jackson last night in regards to media taking more control over our children than any other factor of life, media takes most of that control over them during the summer when they have nothing to do, no funds to join any kind of summer program, summer day camp, and all they're doing is sitting at home just glued to a TV or hanging out on the streets doing nothing at all. I chose to intern with the Freedom School program in hopes of finding a greener side to the pasture that I was in. Our children have gone from the classrooms of the 70s, where Corinne wanted to be a teacher and Tony wanted to be a firefighter, to the classrooms of the 90s, where Willie wants to be a policeman so he can carry a gun with no problem, and Crystal wants to be a welfare mother when she grows up because her mama lives real nice, doesn't have any office hours, and every time she has a baby, she gets a raise. And then there's also Magali, who just wants to live to see 20. And I want you to know that all three of these children are in my classroom right now. This past summer, there were approximately 15 Freedom Schools across the country. They were in cities like Oakland, right here in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and Durham, North Carolina. These cities were host to a program that sought to provide an atmosphere that encouraged both intellectual and creative growth for young people to strengthen their self-esteem, boost their academic skills, and provide outlets for personal expression. The Freedom School program seeks to save Black children and youth from summer boredom, negative behavior, and hopelessness associated with limited opportunities. Interns are primarily college students from across the country that perform teaching duties accentuated with a taste of advocacy in their community. The Freedom School sites are selected in terms of wherever federally funded feeding sites are that a lot of our children and their parents don't even know about. They don't know that if you get free lunch during the school year, you are due to get free lunch during the summer. They won't let you know where the sites are. It's not something that's publicized in that way. We go across the country in these cities finding these sites, finding a place to host our program, finding whatever means we have to find, begging, scrimping, turning in cans, all kinds of things to make sure that the program is free for them. We have the resources to just make them know that whatever it is that they didn't catch on during the school year, they will be catching on during the summer. That starts our advocacy. And I didn't write anything else because I knew that anything I had to say about the Freedom Schools and my experience this summer was going to come from the heart. I was fortunate enough to teach at the Freedom School in Los Angeles this summer, and it wasn't an easy task. We can respect for months and months and months everything that was done by the people who went before us, and you never really know how hard it is until you get out there and really try to make a difference. It's so easy to give up $1 or give up a coat or give up a toy, but it's a lot harder to go out and give time. And I charge this whole panel to think about coming to our Freedom Schools. There will be one in a city near you at some point this summer, and talk to these kids and let them know that, you know, taking time is more important than just words. The beginning of the Freedom School for me was being confronted with a child who said to me, Miss Taft, I just have a question. You know, we're sitting here talking about what goes on outside in the streets and everything, and I just need to know. No one seems to want to answer this question. See, my uncle was sitting at home playing poker, and these 4 white policemen just broke into their house, and he tried to run, and they shot him in the back, and I just don't know why. My grandmama doesn't want to talk about it, and everybody seems to act as if it's some kind of secret, and he started to cry, and I started to cry because I couldn't imagine in a million years that I would ever be confronted with a question like that. And the worst part was that I didn't have any answers. And all I could do was be there for him, to let him know that I would be there for any questions he had. And I would try to answer them, and we would try to find the answers together. From that came a community project of the children drawing pictures of what they thought the concept police brutality meant, what they thought was their image in the community, what their role was, how they felt they were being perceived. One journal note from a Freedom School in Harlem this summer was, the kids had a good day, and there was a lot of participation in the community walk. Some of the children that didn't participate felt there was really nothing that they could do to change things. This told me that we needed to focus more on community pride and their own power. And I can tell you from experience that in school, I am bombarded with objectives to fulfill by the end of the semester. And I try my best to let these kids know the power they have. 3rd and 4th grade, I'm getting them right when they're on that fence of, I'm a child, but I want to be a man. And I can let you know that being able to just do it my way and listening to them and letting them tell me what they wanted this summer has made my teaching experience so much better this year. Bringing conflict resolution lessons into my classroom, despite what the administration says, is making a world of difference. To have one child just come up and say, you know, Ms. Taft, we're learning math and fractions and all kinds of things, but it means more than anything in the world to me that you listened to me when I told you that, you know, my dad was beating on my mom and we were in a shelter. And the shelter they chose to stay in was in Baltimore, and I did drive him to school every morning to make sure that he got there. And that meant more to him than his ISM objectives at the end of the semester that he had achieved. The Freedom School program is out there. It's out there trying to make a change, and it's out there trying to make a change with youth behind it. The whole focus of the Black Student Leadership Network is for us to work with our mentors, some who are on this panel today, some who you will see throughout the weekend, to work with them, to learn from them, and then pass that on to the next generation to make a 3-generational link, which I think is so vitally important. To be closer to their age, to understand where they're coming from, to let somebody like Magali know she's a pretty girl. She says, you know, Ms. Taft, no one ever told me that I was pretty. They told me I was fly and beautiful and tough, but they never took the time out to tell me that I was pretty, and that means the world to me. And that's what we try to do in a Freedom School. We try to let these kids get a nutritional meal 5 days out of the week. We want it to be free. We want them to be there than to be on the street. It's because of them that the Freedom Schools were as successful as they were last summer. In closing, the best way to summarize the whole experience was graduation from the Los Angeles Freedom School on South Avalon Boulevard. And we took the time out to thank everybody, all the adults. You know how you always have to thank the grown-ups. But luckily I was aware enough to remember to thank the kids and to let them know that they were there because there was a grown-up sitting next to them that cared. And they showed that they cared in more ways than we can imagine. And after the graduation was over, Dominica came up to me and she said, you know, Candy, this is a really nice party that you're giving and everything, and I'm going back to school next week, and they have really nice computers there, but they don't have anybody there that cares about me the way you guys showed us this summer, and we can't wait for you to come back. And I charge everybody in this room to assist the Black Student Leadership Network through the Ella Baker Child Policy Training Institute to make this happen again, to make it happen in more than 17 sites across the country, to bring the Midwest into this whole glorious dream that we've seen come about. It happened 2 years ago, and every time we got together and we talked about it and we talked about it, and we'd come to the end of the conference and we'd hold our hands in prayer and we'd say, oh good, and we're like 21, 25, I don't even know if we can pull this off, and I would hold hands with Casey and we would just start crying like we were filled with the Spirit. But let me tell you, there is no spirit like doing what we did this summer. And I want everybody to join in that dream this coming summer of '94. Thank you.
Thank you. I have been notified, we're going to really, it may not be fair, but then again, it may be very fair. From now on, you have 5 minutes. And those of you who want to go to dinner can go to dinner and come back. But some of us need to stay here because of our cholesterol. I just want to read something that was sent by Miss Sonia Sanchez. I was talking to Miss Sanchez, and I said to her, you know, one of the things that I've found is that the children don't have that. They need to get a fire from inside. And Sonia wrote this poem. I'd like all of you to hear it. Sometimes I wonder what to say to you now in the soft afternoon air as you hold us all in a single death. Where is your fire, I say? I say, where is your fire? You got to find it and pass it on. You got to find it and pass it on. From you to me, from me to her, from her to him, from the son to the father, from the brother to the sister, from the daughter to the mother, from the mother to the child. Where is your fire? I said, where is your fire? Can't you smell it coming out of our past? The fire of living, not dying. The fire of loving, not killing. The fire of blackness, not gangster shadows. Where is our beautiful fire that gave light to the world? The fire of pyramids. The fire that burned through the holes of slave ships and made us breathe. The fire that made guts into chitlins. The fire that took rhythms and made jazz. The fire of sit-ins and marches that made us jump boundaries and barriers. The fire that took street talk and sounds and made righteous hip-hop sounds. Where is your fire? The torch of life of Zinga, Nat Turner, Garvey, Du Bois, Fannie Lou Hamer, Martin, Malcolm, and Mandela. Sister, brother, come. Catch your fire, don't kill. Hold your fire, don't kill. Learn your fire, don't kill. Be the fire, don't kill. Catch the fire and burn with eyes that see our souls, walking, singing, building, laughing, learning, loving, teaching, being. Hey, brother, sister, here is my hand. Catch the fire and live. Sonia Sanchez. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hope Hill, Howard University Anti-Violence Prevention Project.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cosby, and to Reverend Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition for allowing me a few minutes on this panel. My words today are going to be said for Gretchen Wright, that Reverend Jackson mentioned a few minutes ago. On Howard, I'm a professor in the psychology department at Howard. And on Monday, not many of us had gotten back after the holiday. Very few of us were on campus that day. But little did we know that outside of our window, Gretchen's life was being snatched away. Gretchen is a 16-year-old senior at Banneker Junior High School, which is right across the street from Howard. And as has been mentioned today, on the corner, right outside of our engineering building, at 6th and Bryant Street, Gretchen's boyfriend put a gun to her head and ended a dream. So as we move along today, and especially as we speak our words tonight during our dinner, I would like us to say a special word for Gretchen, who is on critical life supports. A bullet, as they say, a bullet knows no color. But a 16-year-old skull or brain was not designed to hold a bullet. So as we speak today, let us speak a positive word and send up for Gretchen Wright, who is 16. No, I think I can make it. Thank you. Who is 16 years old, who is lying now at Howard University Hospital. And let us affirm and promise that whatever program we develop, whatever model we develop, ends and eradicates the needs of young children, young men to blow their girlfriends away, 4-year-olds who get caught in the crossfire when they're watching a football game, babies who almost die in the arms of their 16-year-old fathers who are running from the bullets. Let us affirm that our models and our programs will once again recreate childhood. So all the Lonnie Smiths and all the Gretchen Wrights of the world will indeed have that, a right to life. And that, after all, really is what the right to life is all about. I want to share with you very quickly at Howard, a couple of years ago, we started what is known as the Howard University Violence Prevention Project. It's a highfalutin name, but it's really a very small project that's designed to serve as a model, hopefully for other urban areas. It specifically targets young children who live in very high crime area, who have witnessed incidents of violence day after day. These are the kids who have to map out where they're going to walk to go to school. These are the kids who have to get home and be out of the kitchen by 7 o'clock every evening because that's when the gunfire starts in the neighborhood. These are the kids who don't go outside after school to play because their parents and their teachers and their principals are concerned about them getting caught in the crossfire. The first thing we did before we developed our project was we went directly to the children and asked them what their lives were like. What is it like being a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old? What is it like being in the 5th and 6th grade? And I want to share with you very quickly what one young man told us in the beginning of our project. He happens to live not very far from here, but seems like lifetimes away. We asked him to just tell us, show us, what do you think of when you think of neighborhood? You know, what do you think of? And he drew this picture for us. And we didn't ask him to draw about violence. We asked him to draw about neighborhood. And then we ask him to tell us what concerns you, what worries you, what's on your mind. What do you carry with when you go to school every day? He's in the 5th grade, he's in the 7th grade now. And what he's drawn here, I don't know if you can see it, but it is a picture of something that is very common in his community over here. It's a truck. And remember, in many of the projects, there are no stores. So people get everything they need from a truck. And his mother works on that truck. This is in far northeast. And one of his real stressors and real concerns, that one day mom might be out on the truck working, and this might happen to her. I don't know if you can see it, but it's a picture of a young man who is well loaded, stacked, carrying, and those bullets are almost as big as his hands are. And so we began to understand what the social reality was of the young children that we said we wanted to impact. And then we asked him, well, tell us, what are some of the stressful events that have happened in your life? And he said, the 5 most stressful events was when my father got killed, the fact that my brother is seeking drugs and I think he's going to get hurt. The third one is when I get a beating. The fourth one is when my best friend gets beat up. The fifth one is when my mom and dad are fighting. And the sixth one is when I have to stay in the house. Now, these are stressors that as adults, I dare say that none of us had to deal with when we were 8 and 9 and 10 years old. What essentially has happened, and I don't want to belabor the negative, but I do want to set the social context, is that violence has eroded childhood and has destroyed the very essence that all children are due, and that is the promise that they will grow and develop in a safe and healthy environment. What are the 5 things that we need to do, and what are the 5 things that seem to work? Well, very simply, our research shows us, 1, that violence is learned. Children don't come into the world being violent, and so we have to change the learning context to one of success, to one in which success is learned as opposed to violence. We cannot do that unless we get the guns out of the hands of children. We can develop all the programs in the world, but I firmly believe that we have to start with a playing field that we can work. Our kids can't even go outside. So you can't talk about developing recreation so much if you can't feel safe outside. We have to get the guns out of the hands of children. Secondly, we have to make sure that every community has a comprehensive after-school programs for all children. Not just for high-risk children or very high-risk children, but for all children. And that those programs teach thinking skills, problem solving, African and Afro-American culture that makes sense. That's not romanticized, but real values that we've brought from the continent, like harmony, interconnectedness, love of life, connection with the spiritual being. That's not a mystery, that's real. In after-school programs, we need to teach that. We need to make sure that there is supportive parenting programs that support adult development and economic wherewithal for all parents. Finally, we need to make sure that we have created specific pathways for children who really have been locked out, who really don't see a future beyond 14 years old, and who are willing to take everything in their lives at 14 if they don't live another day. We need to create a future. And finally, we must plan and create these programs as though we were developing programs for our own children. That's all. It's not highfalutin, it's very simple. We know the things that work, we know that violence is learned, we know that children receive a steady diet on television and in the overt and covert messages of music. And as psychologists, we understand the covert power of rap. We understand that it's not just dancing to a beat, the negative rap, because a lot of rap is very positive. But we are going to have to ask, are we willing to sacrifice the most vulnerable among us who haven't yet formed their worldview and their sense of who they are? And our answer has been no. So in your programs, as you return to your communities, make sure there's an after-school program that is teaching something real. Make sure that all communities, police departments, recreation departments, and parenting groups are working in concert. 6 hours of conflict resolution isn't enough. A year of conflict resolution isn't enough. We've got to link what's happening in schools with what's happening at home, with what's happening on the playground. Those arenas have to be giving the same message. Make sure that there is culture in our curriculum so that our youngsters know who they are. And when they look at each other, there is no mistake that they are looking in the eyes of someone who is loved. And finally, as you move along, let me share with you something that we end with when we give presentations. And I want to say this especially for Gretchen, and that is a pledge. And that pledge is simply this. It's a pledge to be a part of the solution to save our children and families. And simply this. I am prepared to keep the ultimate promise to this generation of children for which our ancestors sacrificed and died, to protect the life of our youth. We cannot claim ignorance anymore. We cannot claim that we did not know that an entire generation of not just African American, Latino, brown, red, but an entire generation of vulnerable children are being destroyed in the carnage of homicide on our streets, or from the psychological death of exposure to violence. When I return to my community, I affirm that I am personally responsible for making a change, and I will commit myself to at least one activity designed to promote the development of our youth and to stop the violence. The Violence Prevention Project at Howard does research, working with communities to develop effective models, not individual programs, but models for communities. Let us know how we can support you after you have made this commitment. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. A.B. Spellman, National Endowment for the Arts.
Actually, I've been well introduced. I note that when you wanted to make a statement about what you saw as an...
Turn your mic on.
Okay. I note that when you wanted to make a statement about what you saw in the streets today, that you went to one of the very best poets in America, Ms. Sonia Sanchez, a former school teacher who has worked with youth for most of her life, and that poem did in fact capture something that the entire audience could identify with. And that is what art at its best can do. Art is not something that people ordinarily think of as being an aspect of this, but when you discuss, previous speaker, the need for after-school programs, there are hundreds of arts organizations across the country that have these. They are incredibly successful, and I will talk about them. But first I have to do something that is required of me here. My boss, Jane Alexander, who has the same agent as you, Mr. Cosby, is iced in New York, and she did send a statement. And I will read some of it. I will abridge it. Please don't tell her, because I do have to go to work Monday morning. But I'm going to skip all the parts and say good things about me. Jane Alexander apologizes for not being here because she wanted to tell you that how she felt the arts could be a part of the solution to this crisis of spirit, the search for values. She wanted to tell you about the programs that we fund that bring hope to communities, which offer children and teenagers not only a safe haven, but a place to build confidence, self-esteem, and direction through the arts. If we are to solve the problems of violence, of despair, of youth at risk, we must offer viable alternatives. The arts are an open door to creativity, to imagination, to the discovery of the intrinsic value of every child, every human being, for the arts speak the universal language of humanity. National Endowment for the Arts is committed to projects and programs which build bridges between communities and the arts, and which use the arts to re-inspire the human spirit. She thanks Reverend Jackson, Mr. Cosby, for the invitation. When Arthur Mitchell heard that Martin King had been assassinated, he abandoned perhaps the most successful career in dance and classical dance that any black man had ever achieved, and went up to Harlem to found the Dance Theater of Harlem, first the school of the Dance Theater of Harlem. When asked why he was doing such a thing, Arthur Mitchell said he was doing it because crime is creative. He said crime is creative. Young people turn to crime because it's the most creative alternative that is available to him. He said that he wanted to offer them a creative alternative, and that's what his dance school proposed to do. There are hundreds of those programs across the country today, and I want to cite a few of them. I would cite the Manchester Craftsman's Guild in Pittsburgh, which trains young people from primarily unemployed families in ceramic art and photography and jazz. It has over 250 students in this program and reaches 2,200 in the public schools. Many of these, it has a college placement record in the 90% and almost 100% high school graduation record. I would cite the Village of Arts and Humanities in Philadelphia, in North Philly, which transforms communities through the arts. It creates arts parks out of drug parks. It gets young people involved in murals and dance and theater and literary magazines, all done by youth, all of a very high standard. I would cite the New Freedom Theater also in Philadelphia, which teaches theater to young. It's a teaching theater. It teaches theater to young people from very, very depressed communities. It has a 98% high school graduation record and an 85% college placement record. And these are...
I would also like to add that when we were doing the Cosby Show 4, actors came out of that.
Our New Freedom?
Yes, sir.
In fact, what's his name? Your son there was from the Inner City Cultural Center in Los Angeles.
Yes, sir.
Another arts organization worked with. So these things actually do work. The Boys Choir of Harlem, which works again with young people from very, very difficult circumstances. It has established the Boys Choir of Harlem Academy, which offers full curriculum to young people in the 4th to the 8th grades. You have to maintain a B average to stay in the program. And they offer all the tutorials that you will ever need to be there. I would cite Jackie McLean's program in Hartford, the Artist Collective. Jackie McLean, a very great jazz musician, he and his wife Dolly went up there into Hartford and again in the inner city and established a comprehensive arts program. Their premise is that if you want to have young people respect their heritage, give them the drums, give them the music, give them the dance of their people, give them the mass. Let them know how to make them, let them know how to do it, and by doing it, you grow. If the New Freedom Theater premise is that if you want the part in the play, you've got to read the script. You've got to commit it to memory. You've got to speak the lines in a way that everybody in the audience will understand what you're saying. Otherwise, you don't get the part. In all of these programs, in Jazzmobile, which was set up out of How You Act, one of the very first programs established in the War on Poverty back in the Johnson administration, the idea is that when you play the piece, you got to play in tune, you got to be able to read the music, you got to know the music when you come to the place. The fact is you have to have discipline to be in the programs. One of the things I'm sure the school teacher who spoke a few minutes ago will tell you, that if you don't expect anything from black people, from any young kids, you won't get anything. And one of the fallacies in people working out in the cities is they make no demands, they have no expectations, and they expect failure and they get failure. What these people do is they put the very best artists in the community and work with young people, and they have them work very hard, doing hard things, things that they can see some progress in, things they get some peer support for doing something that's supportive, and they go forward. One of the problems we all face, and I'm sure all of you face this in your programs, is the hardest thing in the world to get some publicity for programs that work, where you have young people that you have captured and you have them doing constructive things. You will never get in the newspaper for doing that. You know, what you can only get in the paper for is for all the destructiveness that we do to ourselves, and is that itself not a part of what is oppressing our communities. Just a few other quick remarks, because I am determined to do this in 5 minutes as I've been instructed. I do mind. The point that I want to make after this about is that in developing the creativity of young African American people and offering them access to their own heritage through the arts, we have the opportunity to have an integration of programs here, which is otherwise hard to achieve. It's hard to achieve because we don't often think about it. As you develop your programs for young people, look around and see if there are not creative folk who can come in there and work with their minds, who can give them constructive things to do with their times. There are arts organizations, there are artists, there are arts councils in all of your cities that have their hands on such folk and can place them for you. I ask you not to forget this. I'm a parent like many of you are. I have daughters. I have had no trouble with them. The main reason I have not had trouble with them is that they have something to do. They stay busy all the time. If they are not studying, they are playing their musical instruments. The people they hang out with are people who are busy all the time. You see, if you don't keep the little suckers busy, they will drive you crazy. Well, I just say that. I'm trying to be funny. I'm on the wrong panel for that. Well, look, you know I didn't. No, I'm saying if you don't keep...
Are you finished?
Oh, yeah. Was I long?
Oh,
I thought I was short. I carried myself. I did
no, but
you
you wasted time talking to your friend over there, and who left a couple of times to go find some more children.
Okay. All right, I'll stop.
All right, let me at this point. Please, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman's been just staying and staying. He has to go. So, Dr. Calvin Rolock, United Black Fund, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. And
sorry, my apologies. Sorry. My apologies, Doctor.
Thank you very much, and to Reverend Jackson, Bill Cosby, and the rest of the panel. I'm here with somewhat of a heavy heart, Because at 3:30 today, a young man that the United Black Front befriended by buying him tools after he successfully completed a stint at Lawton's prison, was an outstanding barber, just 24 years old, was gunned down at 3:30 at 7th and T Streets. I've got to leave here and hopefully contact his grandfather to see what we can do in order to see to it he's taken care of. Let me state, I had an opportunity to see two movies. One was The Pelican Brief, and as a result of that movie, I learned, Bill, that a black reporter can never expect to marry a white woman in the United States of America. I went and I saw Bodyguard. I noticed that it isn't popular for a black female to marry a white bodyguard. The point that I'm driving at, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's going to be black folk to be able to save ourselves. We cannot rely upon anyone else. And that statement, the only people that can save us for us, is a correct statement. Please believe me. The United Black Fund is a tax-exempt organization. Just as the Jews have a fund, blacks have a fund. And I would hope in 50 states, every community should have a black fund. People help those that help themselves. You should have in your community a fund that you could take care of your needs. We've done it here in the District of Columbia. We fund over 72 agencies. We fund Howard University Center for Cancer. This is the center that's attempting to find out what causes cancer among blacks. And I would hope that sometime, in lieu of the American Cancer Society, in all due fairness to them, that you'd see to it that money come to Howard University Cancer Center, so these young doctors could find out what's happening to us. It's key and crucial. We fund concerned black men. It's rather interesting. We tell our youngsters to say no to drugs, say no to dope. Here in the District of Columbia, the school board started passing out condoms. The United Black Fund started virgin clubs for both boys and girls. And I want you to know that they are functioning in our majority schools here in the District of Columbia. We've got to be creative. And it's one thing that I know that we've never told our youngsters, and Bill Cosby epitomizes this, and I'd like to present him what we are hoping will become the rallying point of every black youth in the nation. When they wake up, I hope they'll say this statement. Midday, I hope they'll say this statement and mean it. And when they go to bed, I hope they'll say it and mean it. And Bill, I want to present this to you, and it simply states, I love life and I want to live. I love life and I want to live. And it's just my view that if we can get our youngsters, who, whether you know it or not, which is a fact, they are youngsters that's never been to Sunday school in their entire life, never been to church, know nothing about the Ten Commandments, never said a prayer. If we could just get them just to repeat this phrase when they get up in the morning, I love life and I want to live.
There you go.
Midday, I love life and I want to live. When they go to bed, I love life and I want to live. And I want each one of you to repeat it after me. I love life. I love life. Say it like you mean it. I love life. I love life. And I want to live. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Cabot. I thought you was giving Bill a virgin t-shirt.
No, your mic is on. Your mic is on. You might read the announcement, please, Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby.
Thank you.
It says Darrell Green is hungry.
No. See, Crockett, what is it? Mr. Bradley, come in and read this, because Jesse can't read. Read the thing.
No, all Gator want to do is memorize it. No, on the for real, what we're doing because of the size of this panel and the interest, from 6:30 to 7:30 is the dinner hour, and those who have tickets, you may go next door to get your dinner. What Bill has decided to do for the most part, because we do not want to cut those off who had testimonies to make or programs to share, is we're going to stay for those who choose to stay and keep hearing these programs so we can collate them and take them around the country. So those who want to go next door to eat, because the night session starts at 7:30, and it will not be open-ended as last night, because we must be out here tonight by 9:30 because of, other things happening in the hotel. So those who want to go to eat should go now, right. But we're going to stay.
Right, and some people, I thought I had cleared this. Are you all different people? Or did you just come up and sit down because you want to talk in the mic? You all legitimate?
Is your name on the list? That's what you have to.
Yeah. All right. Now, I would ask that will we start with the gentleman on the end? You have your mic. We'll start with you. Press the button.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, the Rainbow Coalition members, Dr. Reverend Wright, Bill Cosby. Dr. Cosby, we actually look forward to you returning to Las Vegas again. You managed to keep the national conference for about an hour or so, and they really enjoyed every bit of it. So we look forward to having you back in Las Vegas again. I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to share with you some of the interesting things that we're doing in Southern Nevada in terms of alternatives for reduction of drugs and alcohol, reduction of teen pregnancy, high school dropout, etc., and a host of other things. I think I can I'm going to attempt to be brief, because tomorrow we're hoping to give you a slide presentation of what we're doing in Southern Nevada with the cooperation that I'm heading up, Nevada Partners. I apologize. My name is Mujahid Ramadan. I'm the Executive Director of Nevada Partners. Some 3 or 4 years ago, Governor Bob Miller and I, at the time I was heading up his drug and alcohol programs, and there was an increasing effort to produce education prevention programs. As you know, Nevada itself is rather infamous for incarceration. And Nevada actually incarcerates at a higher rate than any other state in the nation, and hasn't in the past 10 to 12 years dropped below number 3. We realized, quite frankly, that during the decade of the 80s that we spent more money on incarceration in Nevada than we spent on education in our 2 major counties. So the governor really had a desire to see alternative programs develop, but we couldn't find a way for the legislatures, or the legislatures actually refused to fund the programs. Nevada's legislatures meet 6 months every 2 years. I think it was Mark Twain who said Nevada's legislators meet 120 days every 2 years. It would probably be better if they would meet 2 days every 120 years. The difficulty that we find with that type of funding really reinforces that. Well, as situations would have it, we lost in bids to get funding in 1991. In 1992, after the decision in Simi Valley, right after Los Angeles blew up, Las Vegas, outside of California, is the largest city in proximity. Las Vegas blew up, and we found a great deal of what they call social unrest. The governor solicited the private sector to lend its assistance by employing a large portion of what was identified as at-risk and disadvantaged population, mainly adolescent, a combination of African Americans and Hispanics. The program experienced measurable success. It was a joint venture between really government, which is Nevada Partners, really makes up a joint venture between government, the private sector, and the community organizations. The program had measured success on a volunteer basis. We have the luxury of a growing economic base in Southern Nevada, and one of the developers there, Mr. Kurt Kerkorian, approached Governor Miller right after the social unrest. He was, at that time, building the MGM Grand Hotel and Theme Park, and having an investment in Southern Nevada, approached the governor to fund this Nevada Partners project to the tune of $1 million per year. And that's why I want to give some emphasis to the role of private sector participation, because it's really an alternative when government seems to be overburdened in terms of providing this type of opportunity. The governor was joined on the board by Mayor Jan Lavity Jones, who's the mayor of the largest city and who's now also running for governor against the governor. The board was another person from the MGM Corporation, Mr. Bob Maxey, who's really one of the major driving forces behind Nevada Partners. To this date, we've experienced what we consider to be measurable success. For an 18-month existence, there's been over 2,000 persons that have come through Nevada Partners. We've successfully placed well over 85% of those, and we've maintained 79% of those in the work population. This includes a summer program for youth employment for the summer, yes, youth employment for the summer, where we employed over 700 students, and these students were not placed in community cleanup jobs or picking up trash. They actually went into the private sector working as receptionists, telephone operators, cashiers, computer operators, etc. So as a private sector program, it has experienced tremendous success in the fact that we're doing this with no public sector dollars, and people pretty much buy off on that. The private sector realizes the benefit of this. We have an ex-felon population program where people coming out of the prison populations and corporations such as the Mirage Corporation, headed up by Mr. Steve Wynn, is a big supporter of those type programs. There's new language in Southern Nevada called cooperative citizenship that the cooperative community has a responsibility to play to the to what we would consider to be disadvantaged and at-risk populations. The idea behind Nevada Partners is employment preparation, placement, and maintainment. So a real key for us, success for us, is maintaining individuals in the workplace. Some time ago, the governor and I were visiting a low-risk prison population. As we were leaving, one young man said, "Hey, Ramadan, hey, I'm getting out of prison soon, man. Let them know if they give me a job, they only have to watch me for 8. But if they don't give me a job, they're going to have to watch me for 24 and more." Well, the governor thought Mo was somebody outside of the prison, so he said, "Ramadan, who is Mo?" I said, "No, he means more, governor, in your language, but what he's really saying is that he really needs a job." So we found out that getting people to work actually reduces recidivism. There's an increasing climate to move away from, well, actually most properties in Southern Nevada, not only in the gaming and tourism industry, actually all of them are really focusing on a drug-free population. But what we discovered is that as we increasingly hire people who are drug-free, we could end up with a drug-free employed population and an unemployed drug-using population. So we've moved in the direction of making sure that we could provide programs for that population who were now what we consider to be chemically dependent. The measurable success that we've had to this date has really led to an expansion of the program. We just last month broke ground on a 20,000 square feet facility to be built in the heart of what's considered to be the at-risk populated community. And mind you, this is all privately funded. At the completion, it will probably cost about $3 million. They're going to even build a state-of-the-art Golden Glove boxing gym. Our primary focus will continue to be job development and job placement. We would really reinforce and encourage most of you, and I can just conclude on it tomorrow, is to really look at the private sector as an alternative for providing this type of service, because the private sector loses when they have to hire more policemen, more judges, build more jails, incarcerate more people. We sold the idea to the private sector based on the fact that if you invest in this program, you're not going to have to pay so much in the other sense that you're going to pay for locking people up. Again, Nevada locks up at a very, very high rate, and we want to reinforce to you, we appreciate you coming to Southern Nevada, and everything that you leave at the tables really benefits our community. We want you to come on vacation, but we don't want you to leave on probation. And that's a great likelihood with the law enforcement type concept there. But we're moving in a new direction in terms of employment development, reducing recidivism. There's a commitment by the board of directors that every student who graduates from high school from the at-risk communities and disadvantaged communities, if they stay drug-free and not convicted of a felony, Nevada Partners is guaranteeing that population a job. We think that it's going to continue to experience measurable success. It does reduce the burden on the taxpayers and the business community to pay for welfare programs, social programs, health care, and incarceration. These individuals can pay for it by themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Clementine Barfield from Save Our Sons and Daughters in Detroit. I started this organization after my 2 sons were shot. My 15-year-old was critically injured and my 16-year-old was killed. I know the pain that Kent Amos talked about. I know what Hope is talking about as she talked about the trauma that young people are going through. And when I speak to you, it is out of that pain, but also is out of love, and is out of love for my own child that was killed and for countless others that have been killed. It was out of love for my own son that I decided to start this organization. It was not that I hated the child that killed him. It was not that I hated or was angry at anyone. It was simply out of love. And I went beyond mourning because it was something that I felt I needed to do for myself, for my family, and to be a conscience for the community. Because the year that my sons were shot, there were 365 children, 16 and younger, shot in Detroit that year. 43 of those children died. Clearly something needed to be done. This past year, 25,000 people have been shot to death in the United States in homicides, suicides, and accidental shootings, and clearly something needs to be done. What I chose to do was to pull together other survivors of homicide victims and to focus primarily on the gun issue. Somebody said to me just a few days ago, it was not a person of color. They said that, they invited me to lunch, and they said that the time is right, and we're going to move out front with this whole gun issue, because the time is right, and of course the time is right. I helped to make the time right. It's been the blood of the children that I won't let people forget that has made the time right for us to deal with the gun issue, for us to deal with the violence issue. It's been the blood of those children that's paved the way for us to come here today. My own child and the children of those women that were sitting here behind me, here from Washington, D.C., who have lost children, or rather had children killed. We didn't lose them. They were killed. There's a very big difference. If we had lost them, we could find them again. What we do at So Sad might be considered a model program, and I guess it is because it is modeled in some other cities. We have crisis intervention programs, violence prevention programs, and we have peace. In our crisis intervention programs, we work with survivors of homicide victims. We have a number of support groups. Our support groups are for family. We have different support groups for family, for children, 12 and younger, support groups for young women, support groups for men only, and we have support groups in different places throughout the community, mainly in churches. And the reason we have different support groups for different age groups and different people within the family is because everybody in the family grieve differently. We have individual and family counseling. We have community crisis response teams that go into communities after a tragedy happened, that go into schools after a tragedy happened, and we do critical incident debriefing, trying to help young people or people in general refocus after something terrible has happened. A part of our violence prevention efforts deal with conflict resolution. We've developed curricula around conflict resolution, dealing primarily with the things that I've mentioned before: crisis intervention, violence prevention, and peace. And the reason that we did this is because as we work with children in elementary schools, we found out of 7 elementary schools in Detroit that 80 to 85% of those children were traumatized because they personally knew somebody that had been killed. This was someone in their family, someone in their neighborhood, an older sibling's friend. This is not something that they heard about. This is something that they knew, and someone that they knew. In a very recent program that we started doing in one particular elementary school, there were 2 students in the school that had beheaded a 14-year-old, and a 19-year-old. And the whole school is traumatized over the fact that one of those persons that was beheaded was a student there. The other two were also, the two perpetrators were also students there. So we have to work with that whole student population as well as the faculty, because everybody is traumatized when something like this happens. But something like this can happen every day because young people have seen the ugliness that life has to offer. And when they act out that ugliness, we should not be surprised. We have been very poor role models for children in this country. But as I said, we've developed model curricula that is for sale around the issue of crisis intervention, violence prevention, and peace. And the reason we started teaching peace and trying to make peace popular and setting up peace zones throughout the city was because as we work with young people, we found that they have a great frame of reference for violence because they know violence, they've seen violence. They had no frame of reference for peace because they did not know peace. Nobody had taught them peace. They had not seen peace in action. Peace is not a popular lifestyle. Violence is. So as they talk about the ugliness that they've seen in life, if they talk about the violence that they've seen in their own communities and oftentimes in their own families, we needed to balance all of the ugliness with something positive. And we found peace to be that positive force. And the idea of peace is very easy for little kids to catch on to. It's much harder for teenagers who have known violence all of their lives, starting with Saturday morning cartoons. They don't think that peace is possible. But the idea is catching on because just today I called my office and they said that Martin Luther King High School had just dropped off a check for $618. Now, that's not a whole lot of money, but that was money that the school raised in having a peace step contest. Peace is becoming popular among the students. Just last week, Denby High School in Detroit had a peace rally. It is time that our young people start focusing on life. They've seen too much death. One of the things that we do is we work with prisoners in Ryan Correctional Facility. It's the only prison in the city of Detroit. Most other prisons are outside of the city. The men at Ryan are trained in peace and conflict resolution. We in turn take students that we work with in the schools and in the neighborhood to Ryan to talk to these men. The men talk to the students about making wise choices, about how if they had done things differently, they wouldn't end up there. They would not have ended up there. That is not a scared straight program. That is a program that's about love. Because if they didn't love young people, they would not do this. We get hundreds of letters from prisoners that want to do something to help the children because oftentimes they have children on the outside and they're scared for them just like most parents are scared for their children. And I know my 5 minutes are up, but I feel, Bill, as though I've paid a terrific price to be here today. And I felt for a long time that people just didn't care. I truly have, because it's been very disappointing in trying to get people to support the issue, to buy into the concept of stopping violence, to buy into the concept of eradicating guns. And now that people are listening, and people like Jesse and yourself who have a national voice, the fact that you are together and you're listening, I want to tell you a whole lot. You know, I'm trying to condense things, but I have a whole lot to say because it's been 7 years. And I'm talking about 7 years of going to funerals and helping families trying to get their kids' bodies out of different states after they've been killed in different states, in Ohio, in any place where there's a military basis where our kids are going to sell drugs. It's been a hard 7 years. It's been a 7 years about death. And now there's the possibility for life because more people are getting involved. So I have a whole lot to say, but I'll stop.
Express yourself.
No, that's okay. That's okay. But I do want to say one last thing. One last thing. The fact that the children at Martin Luther King High School raised $618 for the organization is significant. They're not the first youth group to have done things like that. Boysville of Michigan, which is where children are incarcerated, have Stop the Madness program modeled after one of our documentaries, and they raise money for the organization as well. They do it on campus there, and oftentimes when they're allowed off campus, they go and rake folks' lawns and things like that just to raise money for this organization. No church in the city of Detroit has ever given us $618 or $300. No church. And believe me, we've asked. But the children are doing it, and the children are going to be a part of helping to turn things around themselves, and I'm grateful for that. And when things like that happen, I'm encouraged. There's hope. I've seen so much death that is just good to see some life.
Leonard Lawrence, current president, National Medical Association, child psychiatrist by training, community advocate by choice. I'll give you the bottom line about the program I'm going to describe. Since its implementation the 1st of March of 1992 to the point of last measurement, which was the 1st of September of 1993, we have seen a 50% reduction in both violent crime and family violence in the program I'm about to describe. This program is San Antonio Fighting Back, a program which pulled together a tri-ethnic coalition and targeted a population density in the southeast quadrant of the city of 250,000 people. That population is 29% African American, 41% Mexican American, 30% Anglo American. We live 150 miles from a major point of entry of drugs into the United States, and we clearly are a first-line processing center for distribution to the rest of the United States. But drugs clearly have their impact in our community first. During the last 18 months, now almost 2 years of implementation, San Antonio Fighting Back, which has been based on 3 principles: community empowerment, neighborhood development, and community enhancement, has pulled together neighborhood organizations, churches, schools, media, and businesses in the target area to develop a coordinated program which is centered in the 6 middle schools in that target area and the 2 high schools. Programs in which local business people are both mentoring our young people but also beginning to teach them some job skills. Programs where our elderly are being active mentors and surrogate grandparents within single-parent families. Programs where we are teaching people at the local level, based on their identification of their desires and their needs, how to access major human service systems. This is a target area where at the time of implementation of our program, the police response rate to problems in the area was 30 minutes. But since our program implementation and the coordination that we have developed, that response time is now 5 minutes. We have senior citizens who now feel they can walk the streets of the target area. Don't get me wrong, I say there's been a 50% reduction in both family violence and violent crime, and this is measured by both police reports and hospital reports. We still have major problems there. We still have drive-by shootings. We still have major gang activity. But again, we have seen a significant reduction. This is not a situation where external entities are running the program. This is a situation where we, meaning those who don't live directly in the target area like myself, take clear guidance and direction from people who do live in the community. The management board of this process is made up of 15 people. And since I chaired the management board, I made sure that it was structured so that 8 positions are from the target area, 7 positions from outside, because we wanted to make sure the community clearly maintained control. We hope ultimately to extend this program to the rest of the city. On the other hand, we are gratified by what we've seen in the first almost 2 years within the target area, and we plan to continue to work. I indicated that I represent the National Medical Association, and we too have incorporated our local NMA component into this activity through the Healthy People 2000 endeavor, because people cannot feel good about themselves if they are ill, if they are engaging in behaviors which are unproductive as far as health maintenance. And so we feel that our local NMA component must be an active part of the process, whether it is through volunteer delivery of service or whether it is through helping people access the needed health care requirements that they have. In the interest of time, I'm going to pass the microphone to my colleague from the National Medical Association, also a fellow Texan, well, she's from Tyler, Texas, Dr. Shirley Marks Brown, who's going to talk about some specific National Medical Association endeavors.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for my introduction. It is an honor to be here, and it is a pleasure to be in the company again of Mr. Cosby. It is a special honor to be in an audience where persons are coming from all walks of life to address the issue of violence. As Dr. Lawrence has indicated, I represent the National Medical Association, which is one of the co-conveners of this conference. We are an organization representing approximately 16,000 African American physicians. When I was initially requested to participate, it was around the question and the issue of, is violence a public health issue? You cannot sit here and listen to the Gretchen story and ask that question anymore. And those of us who have been physicians have been dealing with this issue of violence when you were not dealing with the issue of violence. I am a psychiatrist and a practicing physician for 21 years. Although I'm from Texas, my father, my parents lived here for 10 years. And in 1978, he died as a result of violence. Not by gunshot, but he was a coach in Texas in the old days where coaches were role models and helped young men be productive citizens. And he came to this city with that same hope in mind. And there was a fight, and so my dad said, there's a fight, you get in, you try to intervene, because that's not the appropriate thing to do. So in 1978, middle school youngsters pushed my dad down a flight of steps in this city. So I know about that morgue at Howard University. But that was a phase in my family we got through. So we all have a story to tell, and I tell that story. Many of my friends don't even know I have that story to tell, but I tell that story because we've even experienced this today, where somehow there's a we and a they, and those of us who have, I don't know, I think I have 7 letters behind my name, but those of us who have letters behind our names, and those who are grassroots, or those who are ex-offenders, and on and go, somehow are not on the same page. We are on the same page. Physicians have been dealing with violence all of their practicing careers, and for many of them, all of their lives. So when the Gretchens go to the hospital, it is perhaps one of our members, who happens also to be the chair of the neurosurgery department at Howard, who will probably be caring for that child. When the stab victim comes and she happens to be depressed with 20 stab wounds, she may sit in front of me because her only source of income may be Social Security disability, and I sit and I determine whether she is going to get that disability. When the crack baby is birthed, it is one of our neonatologists who may decide that this crack baby will live and have a chance. So our physicians will be there. So we are every day confronted and deal with the whole area of violence. When your ex-offender or your folks in the program need alcohol and drug treatment, they can come to me because I've done that for 15 years. I have that experience, and we can provide that element of expertise. When your young girls and your women are awakened and ravaged by nightmares of sexual assault and incest, they can come to me because I've done women's programs and helped women through that tragedy. So I come to put not so much a different perspective, but a broader perspective on the topic of violence because I think today and this weekend we have been talking, for the most part, street violence, homicide, and not to minimize that, but to say let us not forget other forms of violence. Let us not forget that battered wife, the psychological abuse of our children, the physical abuse of our children, abuse against elders and older adults, sexual assault, and incest that goes on in the families. And I want you to have an appreciation for the fact that many of us believe that the only reason this issue of violence is an issue today is not because we are in this room and we know that there's violence and there's black on black violence and crime, but rather that domestic violence became an issue. When white women came out of the closet and stated that they were sexual assault survivors and incest survivors, and when crime went into the suburbs, then violence became more of an issue, and the dollars are there. Now, that's not a negative, but what that does say is that this is going to be a phase. We must seize the moment, which is why I am here, because I chair the task force on violence. So black psychiatrists have been dealing with this whole issue for many, many years and for decades, but we're now taking some initiatives within the National Medical Association to establish a Center for Violence. One of the goals will be to establish a clearinghouse of all of what we're hearing today, because this will be a forgotten phase, much like alcoholism was. When white males decided this was a disease, there was money out there. We were treating alcoholism for years and years and years in our profession, so that let's not be deluded to think that this agenda is going to continue to be an agenda, but let's seize the moment. Let's do what we can. We as physicians can be a part of this forum, and we have always been a part of it. And many of the models that I'm hearing today, many of the models that I hear today are mimicking, or I shouldn't say mimicking, or understanding much that we have done in our offices and in our programs for many, many years, that it's not about a program or the money that you thrust to the community, but it all boils down to that one-to-one contact that you make with that person, that you show that person that you care, and that's a healing mechanism. As physicians, we've been accustomed to that. That's not new to us, but that's good, because now that puts us closer to the page. We're on the same page now. So we will establish a Center for Violence Reduction. We hope to be a clearinghouse for many of the models. We're not saying physicians know the answer. What we're saying is that we can be a clearinghouse, that we can establish curriculum for violence reduction within our historically black medical schools in this country. We will begin to do that we can have physician screening and education across this country, and that we will develop curricula for that. But we also want you to know, in closing, that we are available, that in any city that you represent today, we can access physicians who can assist you. If there's an ex-offender who needs drug treatment, call us. If there's a gang member with HIV, call us. If you're setting up a program and you need some physical exams done, call us. There's no component of any program that you will establish today or in the future that will not in some way involve the needs, the health needs of those individuals. And we want you to know that absolutely violence is a public health issue, or I should say a health issue for the public. I thank you. I'm going to stop there. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. My name is Darrell Green. I'm a professional football player with the Washington Redskins, but that's not important. I am president of the Darrell Green Youth Life Foundation. And in church, we sing at time of giving, offering, and gifts. We sing, all things come of thee, O Lord, and of thine own we give to you. And this foundation was started out of God's heart. As the mayor talked about programs here in this city, back years ago, I've been here for 11 years, but back some years ago, I worked with the government, and one little small program, as Mrs. Hill talked about, kids can't go out and play on the playgrounds because of the dangers of a stray bullet. But one program that they started here was a program of, they would take kids from the community and adults from the community, as well as the government people, and they would decide in that community what programs they would like for the kids after school inside of a building, be it computer programs or sports or whatever it might be. But they also had programs like Christmas parties and things like that. And I left a Christmas party one night where they had little generic gifts. I don't know what they were, Hot Wheels or something, I don't know. But driving home, I started to cry as I drove back home because I gave autographs out as professional athletes and celebrities do. But a lot of those kids in December were very underdressed. It was cold, as it's been here lately. A lot of the parents were very smelly, alcohol smelling. It was just a very devastating place for me to be, and just to be Mr. Darrell Green, superstar. And so as I'm driving down the road, I didn't meditate on this or premeditate this. My heart began to break. And I said that in the beginning that we give things to God that are already God's. And I believe that my heart broke was God's heart breaking. And I began to search my heart to say, you know, this is God saying to you, either go back to the suburbs and stay, or come back with a real commitment. And a commitment that is based on God's calling, and a commitment that is based on God's conviction. Because it's only that type of commitment that will stand the test of time. We learn in the Bible that the poor will be with us always. This Darrell Green Youth Life Foundation and our activities and services, hopefully for me, but from a negative standpoint, will only be passed on as a baton. It will need to continue to go on until what I believe Jesus comes again. We find that I found during that time that I needed to start a foundation so that I could make a greater difference. As much as I thought the government was doing, there's, believe it or not, there's bureaucracy in government. And so I started this foundation, just went to a lawyer and said, hey, help me start a foundation. And I believe that the key element was to just befriend people. I just come to this area. We need to befriend the kids. And so we started the Darrell Green Foundation Fun Day in the Park. That's volleyball, kickball, hot dogs, put out clothes, just fun, doing a lot of fun things. And I remember it took about 3 or 4 hours to convince one of the foreigners downtown to bring their little buggy with hot dogs on it to Minnesota Avenue. And finally got that done. But we began to do those things. And I came through the era of the Nancy Reagan days of say no to drugs and don't start, don't stop, you name it. There were millions of slogans. But as time has went on, I believe that God has given me a vision that is his perfect vision. And in thinking back in the days of school when the kids, you know, here we had Dexter Manley who was supposedly not able to read, and I went to school in Houston, Texas, and I seen kids who, when the teacher got down to them, maybe about 2 kids before them, they start throwing spitballs or pull somebody's hair. Why? Not because they were dumb or because they were, I think because they were smart, because they didn't want to go up to the board and be embarrassed. So they got kicked out of the class. And so a person like that, as the scripture teaches, that without a vision, the people perish. Why are these guys standing on the corner all day? Because they don't dream of working in that building or wearing that suit or doing this or doing that. They're standing every day and they have no goals and no dreams. And so over time, the vision has developed to one of, we must continue to have fun. We must continue to befriend. We must continue to give clothes where needed. We must continue to feed when people are hungry. We also must educate. I think that education is one of the greatest tools that we have that bring about the ability to dream dreams, as well as not only to dream dreams, but to bring those dreams to fruition. And then finally, I'm a strong believer, maybe contrary to many, I believe that Jesus Christ died for my sins. And I believe that we must teach our young people the morals guidance that is given to us through the Bible. We must teach them how to treat one another. I grew up on a street where I thought about it today. On one end of the street, it was at least about 30-some houses. And thinking about it, boy, I know, adding up, it was about 50 or 60 kids. We had 7 in our household. And we would play football against this end of the street versus that end. And in time, over time, when I was 10 years old, Mr. Green left our house. I remember Mr. Dawson, he left their house, and Mr. Robinson, and so many daddies left. Now there was 50-some kids with no guidance and no leadership. And I believe that if we can take the young kids today and teach them what is morally right, we can place in them a conviction for righteousness, a conviction for truth, and they'll be able to parlay that in also with their education, as well as us supporting them when they need food and clothes. I think that's what Christianity is. I think that's what helping people is all about. And so we have started this program back in 1988, which now consists of feeding and clothing, continued special events, Christmas parties, fun days in the park, and all those fun things that I think are important. But now we have implemented the Darrell Green Learning Center, which is a computer-based program here in Northeast Washington, D.C., and it's my goal to do this not only throughout this city, but if God will, throughout this nation. Because we are, because of what happened, not only on Fry Point for the Green family and all those kids on that street, but nationwide, we need to assist these single mothers or single dads with these kids, because I don't believe that God created one person to take a child and develop that child completely. And so we are assistants to those parents, and we are, unfortunately, an assistance to the education system in America, which, like it or not, is not up to par. And so these kids can come after school and not only get the moral guidance and the support that they need, whereas the one individual parent may not be able to do it completely, but also they will get that other, whatever percentage it is, of academic training and beyond that they need. And so I'm very grateful to be here. I was given this opportunity on a very short notice, but it's a very large privilege for me, because I'm committed to this, because I believe that God put it in my heart. I, within myself, does not have the wherewithal to continue to do this, but God has made it possible. And the bottom line is this: the proof shall be in the pudding. I look forward to bringing some of our kids here over the several years coming up, or the next few years coming up, and you seeing these kids. And I'll close with this. You know, on some time ago there was a piece where it was hidden cameras where kids, black kids, were in the street, and they would go up to a mostly white person and say, excuse me, you know what time it is, do you have change for $1? And the person, it was hidden camera, the person would go across the street or run away. And I say this, I don't blame them, because I think that the young people in society have come to a place where they should be feared. As someone here said earlier, Amos said, it was a fear when he saw these young men. And I think that we need not to run from that, but we need to face it head on. And I believe that through the Darrell Green Youth Life Foundation and the Darrell Green Learning Centers, we will be able to produce kids that will not only respect you, but will demand your respect because of the persons that they'll be. So thank you again. Appreciate being here.
Good evening. My name is Melvin Forbes. I'm a corporate director for MCI, where we believe there's nothing more important than friends and family. Today I'm here on the behalf I'm here on the behalf of an organization called CADA, Corporations Against Drug Abuse. In 1988, a group of businessmen got together in this metropolitan area and realized that the pervasive and massive substance abuse problems were also plaguing the workplace. And if we legitimately want to compete in the marketplace, both locally, nationally, and globally, that we must do something to prepare those youth. Thus, they started CADA. I'm a loan executive from MCI, and I came over to CADA in January of this year. I was asked to become the president of this organization on September the 8th. And I was asked to put together a strategy by these group of businessmen who are very prominent presidents and CEOs of many corporations such as IBM, MCI, AT&T, and etc., because they knew that we had to connect businesses legitimately with the community. And therefore, some of the programs that they had tried or were trying didn't seem to be making an impact. So I was, like Darrell, asked to come today on sort of a short notice, and I appreciate this, but I'm a native North Carolinian. I'm from a family of 13. And I thought about behavior, and I thought about what works and what doesn't work. And it became very clear to me, as my father, who only had a second-grade education, and mother only had an 8th-grade education, I asked myself, what was it that allowed them the wherewithal to raise 13 children, none go to jail, none on drugs, none smoking? What ingredients did they instill with us, into us? And clearly the fear of God was one, and the fear of them was another. But I extracted from that, understanding that we're living in a different day, and we must realize that we are in a day now when your child can call 911 and call it child abuse. So we have to be sensitized to that, and I am. But there were some things that I realized that Sally A. Forbes and Will Scott Forbes Sr. instilled in Melvin Forbes that allowed him to become a corporate director in America. And I asked myself, what were those things? In fact, as I speak to young kids today, young children, they ask me, how did you get to where you are? Because that's really what they want to know. And they want to know if I did it through drugs, and they want to know if I did it through some illegal means. And I told them no. I said, I believe that if you go back to some basic things, and I thought about the 3 R's that my parents told me about: reading, writing, and they called it arithmetic. Some of y'all don't remember that, but they did. But then I thought if they would add 3 more R's to those R's, which are respect, responsibility, and restraint, they could make it in this life. So I say to them, I think if you just learn all you can, prepare yourself, but for God's sake, be respectful, and learn that you must be accountable for what you do, and learn restraint, as opposed to going to 357 and 38s and all that stuff. Learn discipline, learn to respect other people's views. However, I understand that they are feeling somewhat hopeless because they have lost credibility in not our value system, but our belief system. They don't know what to believe anymore. They don't know who to believe anymore because they see a system deteriorating. So CADA, through our organization, is trying to give young people intellectual currency. We're trying to give them the opportunity. We're trying to use our core competencies that businesses have every day: accounting, legal assistance, public relations, and take it out into the community so that they really do believe that businesses do care. Because guess what? If you don't have business in your business, you don't have much of a business. And that's real. Everybody needs businesses to thrive and grow. So therefore, the business community understands that if they're going to have employees of the 21st century that can compete, we must be responsible for helping shape the community. So I'm delighted. I want to thank Reverend Jackson and the Rainbow Coalition for the sagacity and perspicacity for giving us the wake-up call and allowing us all to come here today in this forum so that we could get to know each other, because I hear one thing around this table as I sit here listening, is that whether you're in Detroit or whether you're in North Carolina or Washington, D.C., there are people that are trying to make a difference. And to me, that is great, because when we give up hope and believe that there's no and we are going to use our business competencies. We're not asking Mr. Cosby for any money today, even though we're a nonprofit. But we are going to use our intellectual currency to help. So on behalf of MCI, a friends and family organization with a proof positive technology that has gone, now I'm going to stop right there. We thank you very much. So thank you, Mr. Cosby. We appreciate everything. Thank you.
This is our last speaker on this particular segment. So please stay and pay attention.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. My name is Earlene Cooper, and I'm here to represent DC Service Corps. But first, I don't want to talk about DC Service Corps. I want to talk about our youth, my generation, the generation behind me, what I've seen, the killing of my brothers and sisters, what I've seen growing up in the schools. When I see hate crime, it hurts me. What I've done in my lifetime, in my life past history, I've done it. You want to hear from the youth? I hear you talk about the youth. Now listen to us. You telling us the statistics.
Turn your mic back on.
I don't.
There you go.
You telling us about the statistics of the youth. But let me tell you something. I walked those walks, I walked those streets, and I did certain crimes that I really ain't proud of, but I didn't get caught. I can tell you things that can wear your head, but I'm not. I'm gonna tell you about you gotta go in these streets, not to these playgrounds, walk on these streets, come down off your high horses, and they're in the streets with hungry. The parents don't care about them. The parents out doing something they ain't got no business doing. The only thing they're crying out for is love and understanding. The boy that just got killed, I knew him. And it hurts me to see that we'll never grow old together. It hurts me as a generation that, how to say, y'all may be the last senior citizens, because we might not make it to see 25. We might not make it to see 16. We might not make it to see 18. I have a whole lot of friends who's in their graveyards. And we're talking about certain things about the youth. But I'll tell you one thing, what changed me with the Lord Jesus Christ. I got saved when I was 18 years old. And I've been on that road ever since. But no one took the time out to tell me that he is there. And my mother was too busy. Even though she was pushing me to strive for higher goals. But as a child, I needed her. My father, and he did everything for me. He was there. I had two parents. I came from a middle-class family. I went to those poor neighborhood schools, and I made something out of myself. But I had to make some mistakes along the way. I had to learn from my mistakes. I had people there, not my parents, but some other people that showed me the way. So I'm asking you today, as grown-ups, to come down and to see these kids that might need a hug. They might not need no money. They might need a hug, need you to talk to them, let you know, understanding where they're coming from. If you haven't been there and walked that walk, you don't know where they've been. You don't know and understand where they're coming from. But I can tell you, I can. You can't tell me how to force signatures on a check. I know how. You can't tell me what death is all about? You can't tell me if you haven't seen your friend get shot right in front of you. You cannot tell me to see your friend die in a car right beside you in front of your face. You cannot tell me anything about these if you have not experienced it for yourself. And I have. DC Service Corps is about 100 youth. Now we're down to 95. But we do community service throughout the Washington area. It's a full-time 9 months program that we do community service throughout. We got us doing teachers' aids, vision screenings, companions to senior citizens, companion to the hospital for sick children. We go into these schools and talk to the children. Yes, they want someone to listen to them, not to tell them what to do, but to listen to them first, then suggest what you think is right and what is wrong. Because everybody in here is not God, and everybody along the way that made some mistakes. I know I have. I'm not going to be the first one. But please, let me say something about the kids. We visit, and my team visit about 485 kids, vision screen. Out of those 485 kids, we only pass about 10. So you get your health, we really do need health programs out here for the kids. But I do thank to vision screening. I do thank Pearl Vision, LensCraft, and whoever else is backing these kids or giving these kids free eyeglasses because they really need it. And I thank Jesse Jackson and Bill Cosby for giving me this time to speak on behalf of the youth. And I thank them for having a program like this because they really need someone out here who cares. And however they want me to do, I will be here for them because I know where they're coming from. So,
I would like to thank all of you for remaining here this evening to hear about attempts to cure the problems in our community. I'd again like to give a very special thanks to Jesse Jackson for convening us. A very special thanks to Bill Cosby for moderating, for staying here when we had to run away and do some TV shows, and again to all of you. No, we did not. We did not do that.
But you're good.
In conclusion, and therefore, again, let me say in the most sincere way that I can, that all of us are feeling the pain of our communities. We're sick and tired of the violence. We want to bring it to an end. We want solutions. Everybody attending this conference, I'm sure, is doing what he or she can do. And you will go out and you will do more, and hopefully it will be contagious. The one thing that I'm sure about is we're not giving up. It has not gotten so bad, or it will never get so bad, that we will walk away. To the news media and those who are here wondering about what we're going to do, we're going to continue to do what we do, and we're going to do it better. We're going to be the voice, even if it's in the wilderness from time to time, fighting against oppressive public policy. We're going to continue to ask government to do right, to do its fair share. We're going to go up against those with the crime bill who will talk about locking them up and throwing the key away. 3 times and you're out, and all of the other dishonest sloganeering that goes along with politicians at election time. But we're not going to succumb to that. We're going to amass all of the resources that we can amass. We're going to stand up. We're going to fight. We're going to engage the public sector and the private sector. We're going to ask the athletes, the celebrities, the community leaders, the civil rights folks, the ministers, everybody to be engaged in this war that we have to get our communities back. Thank you all again. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, so very much.
Now, brothers and sisters, let me explain something. You know, we made a decision, a judgment, to omit the eating to stay for this session. Because of the time situation, the way the lighting is, if you leave now at all, you will completely disrupt tonight's schedule. We must be out by 9:30 because of hotel regulations and the like. And we have a set of lights here from CBS and all that. And so the panelists are here for tonight's session. And the New York Knicks fan who assumed they were going to win because Michael Jordan had retired, a broken-hearted Knicks fan, Spike Lee, is coming in now. Give Spike Lee a hand. Don't sit too far away. You sit up here. Just sit right down. Sit right back down. Sarah Green, don't get too far away.
Actually, ladies and gentlemen, this whole thing is moving along very, very well.
Yes.
And those of you who think it's been slow, you could imagine how long it would have been had we in Oregon.
What?